We're on air.
And we bang the gavel. Bang the gavel, right? Good evening. I'm calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee for May 1st, 2019. Would the recorder please call the roll?
Mayor Bennett.
Here.
Member Kaiser.
Present.
Member Anderson.
Likewise.
Member Nanke.
Here.
Member Leon.
Present.
Member Osick. Absent. Member Hoy.
Here.
Member Cook.
Here.
Member Lewis.
Here.
Member Nordyke.
Here.
Member Tigan.
Here.
Member Shrock.
Here.
Member Moore Green.
Here.
Member McCoy. Absent. Member Barker.
Here.
Member Anderson.
Here.
Member Sund.
Here.
Member Milton. Absent.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Now it's time for public testimony, and I'm going to be calling two people at a time. We have two mics. I would like to remind you that testimony is limited to 3 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 2 minutes have passed, and a red light will signal the 3-minute time limit. If you're here testifying with a group, please, if you're able to select a spokesperson for testimony, they can speak for 5 minutes if you choose to do that. After the testimony, those belonging to the group in the audience may indicate support by show of hands or standing. And other members of the same group have additional information. They can provide testimony in 3 minutes. So first on the list is Scott Snyder, followed by Sandra Burnett.
Good evening, councilors and Budget Committee. Scott Snyder, I'm the manager for the Grand Hotel Downtown Salem, as well as the chairperson for the Salem Area Lodging Association. Earlier this year, the council voted to make a tourism promotion area a council priority for this fiscal year. This allows Salem lodging properties the opportunity to assess a 2% fee on their guests and dedicate those revenues towards tourism promotion through Travel Salem. We need to stay competitive and aggressively market our destination, and the TPA allows the industry to pay its own way and implement strategic marketing initiatives. The TPA was vetted and approved by the Cultural Tourism Promotion Advisory Board. It's been endorsed by the Salem's major cultural heritage facilities. In addition, Mayor Bennett, Councilors Hoy, Lewis, Kaiser, Anderson, and Nanke have shown support for the TPA. Several Salem members are in the audience here with me tonight showing their support for this proven concept. The beauty of this is that it is not going to cost the city a penny. We are going to pay our way. We will be compensating the city for any collection costs that are incurred, and they would do it in the same format that the hotels currently submit their TOT each month. There would just be an additional line item on the form that would indicate what the TPA collections were, and they would make that payment to the city. The city would be compensated for collecting and dispersing that money to Travel Salem as our destination marketing organization. There's two very significant benefits to the city. First, the TPA will significantly increase our TOT collections, which means the city will get 75% of a much bigger piece of pie. You'll get more money to spend on parks and other city priorities. We have plateaued over the past couple of years in our TOT collections. You can see it on the grid. Without something new coming in, new hotels or new marketing to help facilitate or augment people coming in during our softer shoulder months, it is not going to grow. So we believe that the TPA will have a similar impact that the TID had in Portland 6 years ago. Secondly, we're recommending that the City Council look at assessing a 4% fee on vacation rentals, such as vacation rentals by owner and Airbnb, that would be able to be funneled towards homeless issues in Salem. The tourism continues to seek ways that contribute to the overall health and vitality of the city, and homelessness is a concern concern that we both share. The TPA is a win-win for the city, new revenue at no cost to the city, and we're ready to go and would like to get the TPA up and running by July 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Mr. Member
Chris?
Hoy.
Take your pick.
Member Hoy.
Anything is fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming down and giving us this explanation. I know it's difficult in 3 minutes to tell your whole story, and so I appreciated the time that we recently had together to really get an in-depth understanding of this issue. And you characterized my support for the program earlier, and you're absolutely right. I think this is a win-win, and I fully support this concept, and I hope that we can put our resources behind getting this going right away. So
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Hoy. All right, thank you.
Ms. Burnett.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here today. Sandra Burnett, Ward 2, Salem Art Association. I'm speaking as part of the cohort of the Salem cultural facilities. Many of them are here today. And firstly, to say thank you for the support that we receive from the TOT fund. It's a crucial part of our operating, and we could not sustain the services we give to the community without it. Having said that, I just want to point to two issues that I think is worth bearing in mind. And do you mind if I send across some handout?
I believe staff can help with that, but your time is still going, so let's
Yes.
keep going.
So, in terms of these handouts, there's 2 points I'd like to alert you to. This handout is 10 reasons to support the arts in 2019. This is put out by the Americans for the Arts. Their web page is here. All of those blue ones, if you get it on their website, they will take you through to the data. And it's the data that's important. Number 4 here talks about how arts strengthen the economy, that the production of all arts and cultural goods in the U.S. added $764 billion to the economy in 2015, including $21 billion international trade surplus. The 4.2% that it accounts for is a larger part of the nation's economy than transportation, tourism, and agriculture. The nonprofit arts industry alone generates $166.3 billion in economic activity annually. This is spending by organizations and their audiences, and it supports 4.6 million jobs, generating $27.5 billion in government revenue. It's a lot of numbers, but I think the numbers speak for themselves. The other point just to bring your attention to is number 5, the way in which arts drives tourism and revenue to local businesses. The attendees at nonprofit arts events spend $31 per person per event beyond the cost of admission on items as meals, parking, babysitters, and so on. This is valuable commerce for the local businesses. 34% of attendees live outside the country in which the county in which the art event takes place, and they average $47 in event-related spending. Art travelers are ideal tourists. They stay longer and they spend more to seek out authentic experiences. So just to put the investment that you make in the culturals in that context, it is a good return on investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burnett. Any questions? Perfect. So next for testimony is Michelle Cordova, followed by Ross Sutherland, Roberta Cade, and Roger Williams.
Hello, thank you. Michelle Cordova, Ward 2, Executive Director at Willamette Heritage Center. In this year's proposed budget, a portion of the transient occupancy tax funds will support 10 facility operators' general operating budgets. These cultural tourism sites draw tourists to Salem, enhance visitor experiences, and offer recreation and entertainment to Salem residents. There are 10 organizations who are referred to as facility operators. Just to give you an overview so that everyone remembers, they are Bush House Museum, Deepwood Museum and Gardens, Halliford Museum of Art, Historic Elsinore Theater, Gilbert House Children's Museum, Salem Art Association, Salem Multicultural Institute, Salem Riverfront Carousel, Willamette Art Center, and Willamette Heritage Center. As a group, these 10 organizations employ close to 100 people, bring in 600,000 visitors to our sites every year, and log close to 50,000 volunteer hours per year. More than ever, as a group of tourism sites, this cultural consortium will be strategically working together to increase our impact on tourism in Salem. We look forward to more conversations with the City Council in the upcoming year on ways that we might be able to work together to leverage TOT funds in the best way possible. In the meantime, on behalf of the facility operators who receive these funds, we'd like to say thank you for your support in making Salem a cultural appealing city.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My name is Ross Sutherland. I'm the director of the Bush House Museum, and I wanted to speak tonight on kind of another side of the TOT funding, which is quality of life issues related to the cultural heritage or sites in Salem. Each year, we have thousands of students and young people, youth, visit these sites through field trips, family vacations, club activities, and other ongoing programming. And the National Education Association states that students who participate in field trips and these kinds of activities have higher grades, higher graduation rates for high school and college, and also over the span of their life have higher incomes. One parent summed it up by saying that in addition to reading, writing, and arithmetic, that the fourth R is roaming, and that they wanted to get students out to see things beyond their neighborhoods, increase their confidence, encourage students to reach beyond what they know, and also to help students to understand how the past and the present help shape the future. So students, and I don't think we got the figures for that, but of those 600,000 visitors each year, a significant number of those are student and youth. And they are visiting all of the different sites and in a number of different ways. The visitation that I'm most familiar with is the program at the Bush House Museum, which is the Arts and Heritage Immersion Program, where we bring students from some of the most challenging schools, Title I schools here in Salem and Marion-Polk and Yamhill counties to the museum and the Arts Center. And for 75% of these students, this is the first time that they've ever visited a museum or an art center. Typically, their habitat, if you might say, is a school, their home, store, church. Those they kind of are in a circle, and this gets them outside. And some of them have, especially people that live outside of Salem, Lancaster, some of the other places, have never been downtown. So. The field trips help make connections with the classroom learning and Oregon history and support teachers in meeting state standards. They provide firsthand experience with history and contemporary art to enhance student education in the classroom, and they integrate auditory, visual, and tactile learning through hands-on artifacts and activities. And a really excellent example of that is my photograph of Fort Clatsop, and you can see here the fur trappers are here. This is very different to show a student something like this and then actually hand them a beaver pelt and have them feel it and understand why people came to Oregon, what the interest was in trapping beaver, and it helps us talk about new topics, including extinction and other things.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland, for your testimony. Next up, we have Roberta Cade, followed by Roger Williams, Andrew Nguyen, and Linnell Wilcox.
Thank you. Chair Cook, members of the Budget Committee, I'm here tonight on behalf of Salem 350. We are a chapter of the international organization that's fighting climate change. My printer is broken. I'm trying to read from a phone. It's about 4-point. I'll do my best. At your last meeting, you heard from a number of our members, as well as 4 local school students, about the need to begin to develop a climate action plan for Salem. You'll recall the words of one of those students, Eddie Binford Ross, who said, "There is no longer time to stall on climate change. We need to act now. We need to make change locally. We need to fund the climate action plan. Sadly, later in your meeting that evening, you heard from city staff that they plan to stall on climate change. They do not plan to act now. And in the city manager's budget, there is no funding to move forward with a climate action plan. As most of the councilors know, our organization has been working hard advocating for a climate action plan for Salem for years. We are the only major city in the state that does not have a climate action plan. Indeed, Eugene is now working on their second climate action plan. We worked hard to get the climate action plan included in the strategic plan, and it was included. We worked hard to ask for the greenhouse gas inventory. It was completed. We have that information now. We can go forward. So we are concerned that we are not apparently going to have a climate action plan in this budget. The council adopted the strategic plan for the city, sets a clear and specific goal to develop a climate action plan that prioritizes reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. We must insist that implementation of the strategic plan goal for a climate action plan for this budget not be put off. Climate action is a moral issue. Governments at all levels must take action. The city of Salem must take action. There is no excuse for inaction. The well-being of our children, grandchildren, and their children is at stake.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Roger Williams, followed by Andrew Nguyen, Linnell Wilcox, and Ron Sterob.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Roger Williams, and I am the Executive Director of the Willamette Arts Center. I wanted to address you
Mr.
tonight-
Williams,
I'm
could
sorry?
you please pull your mic up? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. I wish to address you tonight on the importance of maintaining a high standard of livability in Salem. When an individual or a business considers moving to Salem, several things come into play. Obviously, taxes, schools, parks, and recreation are key among them. In summation, all of this distills down into one word: livability. Would you want to work, raise your family, and live here? We are here to address just a single one of these components: the importance of an investment in maintaining a high standard of cultural livability in our community. When I first moved to Salem 37 years ago, the city was somewhat lacking in many of the cultural interests that we now enjoy and often take for granted. The city has made great strides in offering a wide variety of cultural enrichment events and locations: that marvelous carousel, the Bush House, World Beat, Gilbert House, Halliford Museum, and the nationally acclaimed Salem Art Fair. These are things that we should be proud of. These all came about and evolved in part through the generous support of TOT grants. Behind each one of these efforts is a nonprofit organization that brings to life the visions of its citizens, and that brings us to the point of our addressing you here tonight. Over the passing years, the nonprofits have received a smaller and smaller portion of TOT funds. Our understanding was that the original charter allowed for nonprofits only to receive TOT grants. This is no longer the case. And we have continued to receive a smaller percentage each year, down from a high of nearly 16% down to 6%. Many nonprofits in this city depend, at least in part, on the continued support of TOT grants, and many events we support would not be possible without these grants. Speaking for my organization alone, we are currently active in bringing art into our local schools by sending out instructors to bring in art into the classroom. Art classes have seen a cut in their budget almost every year. Some schools no longer have art programs at all. We are currently involved in working with the Salem-Kaiser School District to bring a teacher 3/4 times into a local school. We have agreed to pay one half of her salary, her or his salary for 1 year if the district agrees to keep that person on board once our support stops. We fund Family Clay Sunday, which reaches over 2,000 families each year, many of them from the Latino community or from lower economic social status. They're looking for an affordable place to come and spend time with their children.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your advocacy with the arts.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? All right. Andrew Nguyen, Linnell Wilcox, followed by Ron Stirrup.
Hello, my name is Andrew Nguyen. I'm a senior at South Salem High School, and I am speaking on behalf of the Youth Development Coordinator position that was eliminated and the programs that will be affected by the current budget. And I would like to say that I've been involved in youth development programs since I was 13 with CareCorps, Teen Leadership Camps, I Lead Youth Summits, and 1,000 Souls shoe drives. The impact upon me is that I have become a better person and a better leader in our community. I believe that I'm more social and I am more outgoing, and I believe that I can make a difference in this community and in my future. The impact upon our community is much bigger than what people see. These programs not only affect the students, but it also affects the community. Our community is a much better place with these programs than without. It not only helps students find themselves and become leaders in our community, but to help those in need and those that need shoes or need education. The future of our community depends on these youth development programs, because without it, I believe that a cycle will continue, that we will lack leaders that will want to make a difference and is willing to stand up for our community and the betterment of Salem. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming and speaking tonight about the youth development programs. My question to you is this something that would deserve, based on your testimony, not just the argument of not cutting, but securing funding so this program would be allowed to continue? Would you be able to speak for that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that no matter how much money it costs, every leader that is developed through these programs is priceless. For my example, that for me, I believe that as myself, I can't make much of a difference, but I believe that a group of us built together, working together, we can make a profound impact on our community and in our own futures.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from budget? Member Saunders, thank you.
Sorry, it's okay. I just wanted to comment and say thank you. I believe strongly in this program, and I think it's awesome just to see you here. Giving testimony about it, and to come, and especially when you look outside and it's blue skies, you could be out there, but standing up for what you believe and for the program. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Stone. Member Long.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I have just one question. What would you say has been the most, of all the different activities you listed, has been the most impactful for you?
I believe that the two most impactful would be CareCorps, because throughout my 4 years being involved with it, I started out as a very shy kid. I would keep my head down. I wouldn't talk to anyone. I would just do my own thing. If it didn't affect me, it didn't matter. But through the 4 years that I've been involved, through every summer, I've taken my time and going to these camps every, Monday through Thursday. I believe that I am truly a better person, and I am a better leader. And I believe that 4 years ago, I would not be standing up here fighting for what I believe in. And the second one would be 1,000 Souls, because, it really opened my eyes to what is in our community, that our own peers are walking around school without shoes, worn shoes, too big of shoes or too small of shoes, and their parents or themselves cannot afford them. So they just have to deal with it, either go to school with them or don't go to school.
Thank you again, Mr.
Thank
Nguyen.
you.
Followed by Linnell Wilcox, Ron Stirrup, and Thwaithan Wen.
Hi, my name is Linnell Wilcox, and I already testified about the value of the HRAP program and hopefully fully funding it. And I just kind of wanted to follow up with that with some stories. I know that warming shelters enable a reprieve from the cold. It saves lives, but it also enables people a moment, an evening away from the crisis mode, the survival mode. And so many people that I've talked to have been able to get up in the morning and say, you know, I feel better. I can go out today, and maybe I'll get my ID. Maybe I'll follow up with a rehab place, just because they were temporarily out of the survival mode. And being able to have that through Housing First programs, I know that we're trying to cut it because there's a need for money, and I understand that. And I also know that it's being cut to reflect capacity. But as a social worker, where we've had bottlenecks, where we just can't keep up with the need, I know there are ways to increase capacity. So instead of funding the program less to reflect reality, I'd suggest funding it fully and finding ways to also fund capacity increasing. There's more people who've been displaced because of the flooding. There's going to be more people going downtown, more people in tents, and I feel like we need the program more than ever. But just a couple of stories. There's one of my clients, and I don't work with homeless populations exclusively, but some of my clients have been homeless, so the stories apply. But there was a lady named Ellen. She'd been on the street for 12 years. She'd been struggling with having no place to live, having her property stolen every time she would go for an appointment, no ID, instability and mental health. As I got to know her, I realized she had multiple personalities, because each time I spoke with her, I didn't know who I was getting. But being able to have housing happen for her, she stabilized, she got her mental health addressed, she got a job, she got her ID first, then she got a job. She was a caregiver, but she told me, I'm not a caregiver, I'm an empowerer. I go in every day and ask people, like, what do you need to do to conquer the day? And then I'm going to help them do that. She transitioned off of SSDI, she's paying her own rent, she's doing great. And those are the stories that I'm seeing. When she's actually out there, she has no hope. And then when there's housing, hope grows. And I feel like we need these programs more than ever, even if we have to also figure out ways to meet the capacity that's out there. And just by coincidence, a landlord sat behind me last time from the HRAP program. He said he loves it, and he's seeing people's lives change every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Great. Ron Stirrup, followed by Thwaithan Wen.
Good evening, Budget Committee and councilors, city staff, and residents of Salem. I'm here representing our neighborhood association, SIPCA, Southeast Mill Creek Association. And I want to take you to our part of the neighborhood, which a lot of people don't really know, but they know where it is. Let's go to Home Depot on Lancaster. Let's go out Mission Street or Highway 22 to Corden Road Bridge right there. From Lancaster and Highway 22, we're going to go south along Lancaster and Corden Road. This neighborhood, I'm here tonight requesting a sound wall, earthen berm on Corden Road across from the new Amazon Shipping Distribution Center. The neighbors have been complaining about the large amount of noise that's starting to accumulate. Amazon went ahead and built a beautiful earthen berm along the east side of Corden Road. It's beautiful. It blocks the view of the trucks and activity that's going on. But now how about our neighbors? Our neighbors to the neighborhood off of Saddle Club Drive. They're the ones who are being bombarded by the sound, semi-trucks, air brakes, and the racing. Now, the speed limit in this area on Corden Road is 55 miles an hour. It's the last section of Corden Road. As we get to our neighborhood, that's 55. There's no reason for it. It should be 45, and this should be a beginning start to putting up a sound wall and correcting the problem with vehicular noise for the people on Saddle Club Road. So I'm asking a consideration for this portion of the road, as well as a passageway for the kids to go to the elementary school on the other side of the freeway. Now, I understand through ODOT, the intersection of Gordon and Highway 22 could be years off, a decade off. But I'd like a safe passage and going through the right of safety right away through ODOT for our children and our community to get to the elementary schools. So I'm here to say thank you for considering also the improvement on Lancaster Drive, just up from Home Depot, on up to the really true four corners, Gordon, Kubler, Lancaster, Almsville Highway. And understand that is possibly in the future plans, and we're going to keep following, and I'm going to keep coming as long as I can. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thwaithen Wen?
Yes. Hello, my name is Thuy Tien. I am a junior at McKay High School, and I will be reading a letter on behalf of a teacher who could not be here this evening. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to listen to public testimony regarding the proposed youth development budget cut for this upcoming budget cycle. My name is Lisa Shreve, and I have been a teacher at McKay High School for 17 years. In the past decade, I have been a first-hand witness to the impact that the City of Salem's youth development initiatives have had on our students. We had the opportunity to build from the ground up one of the first teen action team programs in our district, and I am incredibly proud of the precedent that we set for the schools that follow us. This service learning club has given countless opportunities for students to get involved and build capacity in themselves as leaders, all while intentionally and enthusiastically giving back to their community. We would not have been able to support this program without the guidance and energy that Lori Caceres has provided us every step of the way. She has touched more lives than we could ever count in a way that actually creates kinder and more socially conscious humans in this world. In addition, the youth development staff have provided specific opportunities to connect our youth to their community by running programs like iLead, 1,000 Souls, and CareCore. All of these programs have provided reality-rich environments where kids get to collaborate and learn outside of the classroom. But there's more to it. These programs have provided a home away from home for many of their participants. Students choose to connect and commit to these opportunities because they are indeed serving the greater good, but also because they can access support, security, and encouragement that they may not be able to get anywhere else. These programs keep them engaged and safe. They allow our kids to learn about leadership through hands-on experience instead of watching others do so in more traditional environments. They show our kids how to find their purpose and their truth in an environment of trust and compassion. Aren't these the kinds of citizens we want in this city, in this state, in this world? I urge you to give the proposal to cut the youth development initiatives your most serious reconsideration. Our kids need these programs, and we need to make sure our kids are connected and engaged. Please fund the youth development programs in the City of Salem so service learning, responsible citizenship, and discovering leadership can continue to flourish. Respectfully, Lisa M. Shreve, Activities Director and Teacher of McKay High School. Thank you.
Thank you for reading your teacher's testimony. Any comments or questions from budget? Thank you. Is there anyone who did not have the opportunity to sign up for testimony but who would like to provide comments on an agenda item? Oh, if you please come to the mic. If you can list your name and ward before you begin speaking, that would be great.
Jessica Martinez Medina,
part of advocating for not decreasing or taking away the funds for the...
What ward are you in, Ms. Martinez? Do you know?
I live in West Salem, so 9704.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be Mr. Lewis's ward.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Meet your counselor.
Thank you. So hi, I hope you are all having a great evening today. As I said, my name is Jessica Martinez Medina. I'm a student at Western Oregon University, and I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree in public policy administration. I have a health concentration, and I'm a minor in Spanish. I've been part of the City of Salem Youth Development Program since 2014. Throughout this experience, I've learned the value of giving back and serving my community. I would not be where I am today without these programs. They have helped shape me to become the leader I am today. I am pursuing a career in the public sector because of the positive exposure I've had with different organizations in Salem, because of CareCorps, a summer learning leadership camp, where I've been a student leader and a mentor. This camp focuses on working throughout the community to make Salem better. The summer projects in the past have involved beautifying the Brownwood Park in the Northeast area, creating a sea shed for the Marion Polk Food Share, helping create a children's library at Nuestra Casa through the Dream Center in West Salem, and other projects. This program creates a service learning mindset for our youth who are able to see the value in giving back. We can see what the youth development section provides for our community. It is important for our youth to understand that it takes one voice to make a difference. These programs help youth feel that they have a voice and that they have the power to create a change. We see that in iLead, a youth summit for high school students, where they are able to network with other students and gain leadership skills, as well as 1,000 Souls, that was created by students to help their peers have an adequate pair of shoes. We see the impact within the community at the recent Homeless Connect event in March. We gave away 392 pairs of shoes in just one day. There are so many more potential youth projects we could have if we continue funding our Salem's youth program. I'm a low-income student, like many other youth in Salem, and at the end of the day, I was fortunate enough that I met Lori Casares, the Youth Development Coordinator for the City of Salem, who exposed me to these programs. But my story is not unique. These people participating in these programs would not otherwise have these resources available to them. I have met some of my closest friends from this who are also doing great things in our community. These programs helped to shape us and made us into the leaders we are today. So I'm here to speak on behalf of myself, my peers, and on behalf of the youth of Salem. Please, I ask you all to consider keeping our programs and ensuring that they continue to stay in place. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Member Anderson has a question for you today.
Thank you. Jessica, you got to look over here now. We got a question. Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry, I thought he was going to ask.
Yeah, there's two Andersons. That's right. Thanks for coming down, and also thanks to all of you people back there, you young folks. We're really glad to see you here. You talked about this CareCorps, and so did Mr. Wen when he talked. How many students take advantage of that?
So there's around, when I was in it, which was in 2015, 2016, there was around 50 students. But as there's less funding for those programs specifically, there's been less people attending them.
Thank you.
Member Anderson.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to join my friend in thanking everybody for coming. Based on your stories and the hundreds of people that I've met teaching at Western, I could never support a budget that cuts funding to youth development. But a question I had for you is, you mentioned that you're a student at Western Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Has your participation in those programs helped you as you reach the university, helped you in college?
Yeah. I think it helped me to get to college, because without the opportunity of being part of these youth programs, I wouldn't have become a Ford Scholar today. So without these resources, like even in class, being able to actually be comfortable speaking in front of all of you, before I would have never been able to do that. And with taking your class before, I was able to also just become more aware of being able to talk out loud and be confident in myself, and also just networking with other people was important for me.
Thank you. I had one quick question. You'd mentioned you were in the Care Corps program and with mentoring, and I just want to make sure, do you still come back for the Care Corps events? I attended one of the recent Care Corps celebrations and was so struck by how many people at Western and other universities come back and maintain their connections with high school students for mentoring.
So I did come back for like a day event, but I was interning at the Department of Consumer and Business Services here in Salem, so I wasn't able to attend the whole thing. But yeah, I still talk to Lori and I try to attend all the events that I can.
Thank you. And Member Mayor Bennett.
Thank you for coming down. Excuse me. Just wanted to let you know, and your colleagues as well, your information on this program, your support for this program will make a difference. I think I'm very, very hopeful we can keep this one going. It's been an outstanding program. Lori's a wonderful model and does outstanding work with young people. I've dealt with a couple of the programs she's involved in. I'm very excited that we may well be able to resolve this one. It's a tough year. I hope that's very clear for us to find funding, but I think we'll be working very hard on trying to keep these programs as well as Lori in place.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Jessica? Mr. Member Sund, thank you for holding that up.
Thank you. I know you probably can't see over there. Quick question. So you're at Western. What's your future after that? Where do you plan on coming back to Salem? It's not a loaded question, but.
No, I am coming
Okay.
back to Salem. So I'm hoping to, well, short term, I'm gonna work in a homeless clinic, hopefully Arches. I advocate a lot for homeless people and being able to give them access to resources. But I hope in the future running for our Oregon legislator and being a House of Representative. So yeah, in the
Nice.
future.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Right, moving on the agenda, it looks like we're on to meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April 24th, 2019 meeting?
So moved.
Question.
Member Nordyke.
Oh, sorry, just a quick question. I declared potential conflict of interest and did not see that reflected in the meeting minutes. Is that something that's reflected in the meeting minutes?
Let me defer to staff.
We can simply approve these minutes with that amendment, that recusal was stated.
Okay, great. Do I need an additional motion, or will this motion suffice?
Just as amended.
All right. I have a motion moved by Mayor Member Bennett. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Member Hoy. Is there any discussion? All right, great. All those in favor of accepting the April 24th, there's discussion. Excuse me. My apologies.
I have another correction. It has to do, excuse me, with item 2, public testimony. Several people down, Mark Wigg testified, and in the minutes it says South Central Association of Neighbors. I served with Mark on that board. We worked together, but he was not here representing SCAN. So I think it might be important not to give the impression that he was representing SCAN. He said, I talked to him about it, he did say he may have said he lived in SCAN, although he said he should have said he lived in Ward 2. But, so there may have been, I'm not sure what the recording actually said, but I just thought this kind of looked like it could be implied that he was representing SCAN.
Thank you for bringing that forward, Member Schrock. I defer to staff to see if we need to adjust that in the meeting minutes, and based on Member Jacobs' testimony prior, I don't think we need an additional amendment. Is that correct?
I mean, I understand the member's point about this, but I think this is how this person identified himself in the minutes, in the sign-up sheet. It was not a ward, it was just simply a neighborhood association is what he used to identify himself. So that's really all that is. It doesn't speak to he's not representing his ward, he just used that as an identifier.
Gotcha. All right, so it sounds like we don't need an additional amendment then? All right, so I still have a motion on the floor, moved by Mayor Member Bennett and seconded by Member Hoy. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of accepting the April 24th, 2019 Budget Committee meeting minutes as provided, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Motion passes. I would like to ask Budget Officer Jacobs to review the action items and hand out material, including any additions to the agenda.
Thank you, Chair Cook, and good evening, members of the City of Salem Budget Committee. I'll try to do this as concisely as possible this evening. The first item that I'll be reviewing with you is item 4A in your agenda, and that's errata sheet 1. And an errata sheet is a rather formal acknowledgement of an error in the budget and with the corresponding corrective action. While we are heartily embarrassed with any spelling or grammatical errors in the budget, we will correct that sort of mistake prior to publication of the adopted budget. However, if an error impacts the balanced budget or may affect comprehension, we will ask the Budget Committee to approve corrections. In the case of item 4A, the corrections do not have a budget impact, but could definitely impede comprehension if not addressed. So I will begin listing the corrections, if you'll indulge me. The error identified on page 89 for the last statistic listed on the page is corrected by changing the comparison year to 2017 from the noted year of 2016. On page 105 of the proposed budget, some of the caption describing the two charts was obscured. The text in the errata sheet provides the full description. The third correction, 2 of the account code descriptions on page 308 were published in error. The corrected descriptions appear on the second page of the errata sheet. And then something not in your staff report, so we're doing erratas on the fly now. We found an additional Scrivener error that is significant for this evening's agenda in the Urban Renewal Agency budget. On page 41, the first project listed on the page has an incorrect title and project description. The project name should be Salem Police Station Improvements, and the project description should be Urban Renewal Contribution to the Construction of the New Salem Police Station. The project budget is correct. So your motion this evening needs to include staff's amended recommendation with the additional Urban Renewal Agency project correction. Thank you.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. May I have a motion to approve the errata sheet 1 Scrivener corrections as recommended by staff?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Barker. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second again from Member Hoy. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor of approving the Scrivener corrections as recommended by staff, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Motion passes.
Thank you, and I'll move on to the information items listed on your agenda this evening. And I'll begin with item 5A. It's a weekly status of Budget Committee activities. This handout, which is cumulative for the entire budget review process, currently reflects the April 24th meeting with a record of correspondence, information requests by the committee, and ideas or discussion points for future consideration. And I'll move on to items 5B through 5U. There are correspondence received over the past week related to the youth development program that is eliminated in the city manager's budget proposal. Item 5B is an information report in response to a committee question related to an estimated cost for the city to continue monitoring and updating the greenhouse gas inventory. Item 5W is an information report in response to a committee question related to the youth development program. Item 5X is an information report in response to a committee question about a school safety zone adjacent to the School for the Deaf and Eagle Charter School. Item 5Y is an information report in response to a committee question about the process for prioritizing city facilities deferred maintenance projects. And then on your additions agenda, which is at the very back of the packet that was placed on your desk, item 5Z is a compilation of questions and answers from Budget Committee member emailed questions to department directors. We promised you that if you all emailed questions, that we would share the responses. They were great questions, and the responses are equally good, so we wanted to share those with you this evening. And that concludes this part of the agenda.
Thank you. Any questions? Mayor, Member Bennett.
Kelly, do you have any extra copies of 5Z? I got all the way to 5Y, and then I lost my way. Got it.
Gotcha.
This is 5Z?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right. So moving forward on the agenda, it looks like we're to the public hearing for, no problem, state revenue sharing funds. The committee's public hearing this evening is the proposed use of state revenue sharing funds. The public hearing is now open. Just making sure.
And I have just a very brief presentation. The public hearing this evening is the first of two the city is required to hold on the uses of state revenue sharing funds in the fiscal year 2020 budget. This hearing was noticed in the Statesman Journal on Monday, April 15, 2019. While state revenue sharing funds are general purpose, which means local governments have discretion on how the funds are spent, the city must identify possible uses and seek assistance from the public in doing so. It has been the practice of the City of Salem to recommend these funds be used to offset the cost of police patrol services. For your reference, the program budget for police patrol services totals $24,290,830, and the program budget appears on page 107. The total assignment of state shared revenues to support police services appears in the financial summary section on page 351. The amount of state revenue sharing estimated for fiscal year 2020 is $1,890,680, which represents 7.8% of the patrol program expenditure budget. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to provide testimony regarding the proposed uses of state revenue sharing? Great. The public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or discussion from the Budget Committee? Member Moore Green.
Thank you, Chair Cook. I have a couple of questions concerning the testimony that was given this evening. In Mr. Williams' testimony, and if I understood him correctly, he said that the TOT started out at 16% and now they're down to 6%. And I was just curious as to what that decrease is attributed to. Is it just the number of, the amount that's raised?
If I could indulge you, I think perhaps if we could finish the public hearing for state revenue sharing, if that would be all right, and then I'm happy to respond to that question because I have an answer for that too.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. May I have a motion recommending the proposed use of state revenue sharing funds?
So moved.
Motion made by Member Chirac. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Hoy. I have a motion from Member Chirac, and it's seconded from Member Hoy. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the motion to recommend the proposed use of state revenue sharing funds, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Motion passes. Member Moore Green, I believe you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. My apology. I didn't realize we were calling questions on that portion. So
Sure. Actually, I would love to answer that question. The budget in question, and I think the best way for you to look at it, to get a sense of how the funds are distributed, is through your financial summary section. So there's a tab in your budget that says financial summaries. This budget appears on page 249. And actually, the pertinent section is 249. On page 249, and I think the comment was relative to the grants that are provided by the TOT Fund to area nonprofits for operating cultural and tourism facilities and for operating special events. And the allocation this year, which is over $600,000, represents 15% of the TOT expenditure budget.
Okay, great, thank you. And I had one more question concerning testimony that was given this evening. It was the gentleman from, he's gone, from Ward 3. I think that's Ward 3 where he lives, isn't it, Councilor Nanke? The Cordon Road, the earth berm. Oh, is he? Okay, yes. At that neighborhood, does the city butt up to county land? Or is that all city, is that all within the city limits?
That's a great question, and I think we have some staff that can help us as far as the earthen berm sound wall on Lancaster.
Thank you.
Is that what you're referring to?
Budget committee members, I would suggest, in order to stay on schedule, that's perhaps an item we can bring back to you next meeting, the additional information regarding
Perfect.
the
Thank you.
location of the requested project and additional background information.
Excellent. Member Ninky.
Yeah, just a real quick one, because that was brought before council previously, and it had to do a lot with the new interchange that was going to go on Highway 22, and actually what the sound is doing, and what is the best course of action for us to take to protect those neighbors, because they are just being screamed at by banking noise. So, significant issue, but staff has done stuff on that in the past, so if we can get a copy of that, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Moving on, Budget Officer Kelly Jacobs will present overviews of the Urban Renewal Agency and 2 service area budgets. The Urban Renewal Agency and the Strong and Diverse Economy service area presentations will occur consecutively. Following Strong and Diverse Economy, there will be an opportunity for the Budget Committee to ask questions of staff and to discuss both budgets. Following discussion, Kelly will present the service area of Safe Community. Rather than introducing Kelly each time, we will allow her to begin the next presentation when there are no further questions or discussions.
And as Kelly is coming up, if I could take a moment at the pleasure of the Budget Committee to, I realize from the questions that were asked last week that perhaps I did not provide additional sufficient background and context for the city manager's proposed budget. My intent with the budget, and I think it'll be evident in the safe community result areas, my intent with the proposed budget was to provide a realistic balance between fiscal alignment and service delivery, and the 2 service areas, two departments, excuse me, that you'll be hearing from in a moment through Kelly are the largest we have the largest expenditures within the general fund, so the fiscal alignment is a key issue for your consideration as you're hearing the budget presentations. Also, certainly the testimony regarding important programs to the community. Please be assured that this budget was not made lightly. The recommendations were done after 3 months of tough work using strategic direction provided by council through the policy agenda, strategic plan, and other policy work. The budget recommendation attempts to continue the services that have been restored by council, fire, police, library, responsive to community needs that were identified through the strategic plan, and to really avoid significant reductions in the services that the public and council have said are important. The department directors attempted to avoid across-the-board cuts. They looked at programs through criteria such as demand. Is the demand for a service increasing or not? Is it mandated by state or federal law? What's the population served? Is it citywide? Is it a large segment of the population? Is it a small segment of the population? Are there cost recovery opportunities? Is the public reliant upon the city to provide a service? And also, we attempted to minimize the number of layoffs. The proposed budget is responsive, I believe, to the general fund's unsustainable fiscal health. The city is spending more than we're receiving in recurring revenues. We're spending down our working capital in the general fund, and that working capital will be gone by July 1st of 2022 if corrective action is not taken. The proposed budget uses $3.2 million less of working capital than had been forecasted, and that's largely a result of the proposed reductions in the budget. Again, none of those were easy, and all of the choices that are facing the Budget Committee and City Council are difficult. Again, the difficulty of these recommendations, I can't say more strongly, and I really appreciate the people that have come down to provide testimony. we are using one-time revenues to support ongoing services, and that just is not sustainable. So, thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Powers. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I am going to go through this as quickly as I can, but perhaps not as fast as last week. So I look to all of you to help me with an occasional whoa if I get going too fast. So strong and diverse economy. Because of the robust connection between the programs and projects promoted by the Salem Urban Renewal Agency and the city's activities to support economic development, the Urban Renewal Agency budget and the result area of strong and diverse economy will be reviewed consecutively this evening, as Chair Cook noted. Salem's Urban Renewal Agency is a distinct corporation with the mayor and city council serving as its board of directors and the city manager as its executive director. City staff, primarily in the Urban Development Department, support urban renewal programs through an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Salem. The agency invests in approved public infrastructure, buildings, streets and bridges, utility connections, parks, trails, environmental cleanup, and restoration of natural areas. Leveraging urban renewal resources with private investment has opened blighted areas to reinvestment, increased employment, and enhanced economic opportunities where they may not have otherwise occurred. In Salem, investment priorities are framed by urban renewal plans and the policies and goals established by the agency board with input from advisory boards. And this map is actually a map of our urban renewal areas. And just starting at the top there, it's North Gateway in light orange. It was formed in 1990 and is the largest at 926 acres. Riverfront Downtown is in light brown. It's the oldest area, and it was formed in 1975. West Salem is yellow. It was formed in 2001. South Waterfront in olive green is the newest area, formed in 2007, and includes a portion of Minto Island. McGilchrist is in pink and was formed in 2006. Fairview, the area in light green, formed in 1984, is no longer collecting tax increment. And Mill Creek in purple was formed in May of 2005. The Urban Renewal Agency budget is comprised of 4 funds. You can find the agency budget in your notebook by locating the second tab, or I beg your pardon, the second table of contents tab near the back of the notebook. The Tax Allocation Bond Fund, or Debt Service Fund, beginning on page 13 of the Urban Renewal Agency budget, includes the tax increment revenues realized in each individual urban renewal area. Urban renewal activities are funded by tax increment financing, the incremental tax increase resulting from escalating property values during the life of the urban renewal area. When an area is formed, the existing taxing districts continue to collect revenues at a capped level. This is referred to as the frozen base. The tax increment, which is the amount of property tax realized above the frozen base, is used to eliminate blight, stimulate development, and improve property values within the urban renewal area. When the area closes, the original formula for tax revenue distribution resumes for the other taxing districts within the area. A successful urban renewal area translates to additional tax revenues for the other taxing districts generated as the result of urban renewal activity. Expenditures in the Tax Allocation Bond Fund support the repayment of indebtedness required to finance improvements within the urban renewal areas. To collect tax increment, the agency must have debt. Revenues from the debt issuance are used to fund projects. The tax increment is used to pay off the debt. The expenditure budget for this fund is $17.5 million. The Tax Allocation Improvements Fund, or Capital Improvements Fund, beginning on page 21, receives the proceeds realized from long-term or short-term borrowings in the Debt Service Fund to fund improvement projects. The total expenditure budget proposed for fiscal year 2020 is $62.6 million. Details about projects in each urban renewal area are included in this section of the budget publication. Operational revenues and expenditures of the agency-owned Salem Convention Center are accounted for in the Convention Center Fund, beginning on page 53. Revenues are derived from food sales and meeting room and equipment rentals. The proposed fiscal year 2020 expenditure budget is $7.6 million. As the Convention Center opened, the Urban Renewal Agency also established a gain-loss reserve to help augment an operating shortfall or to fund repairs or capital improvements to the facility. A combination of transient occupancy tax funds and income from the Convention Center operations have been used to fulfill the $4 million goal for this reserve. Working capital to begin fiscal year 2020 is estimated at $4.9 million. The operating budget is $2.4 million and includes an expansion of the convention center kitchen. Now we're transitioning from the Urban Renewal Agency budget to the Strong and Diverse Economy Result area in the city budget, beginning on page 135, which is directly behind the tab with the dollar sign. A strong and diverse economy is one with a diverse economic base, robust job growth, business retention and recruitment, and a thriving downtown. The total expenditure budget for this result area is $12.97 million, including 31.52 full-time equivalent positions and representing 3.2% of the total appropriated for all result areas. Position changes in this result area include the elimination of a vacant half-time real property specialist position. City funds that support a strong and diverse economy include the Building and Safety Fund, which is part of the Community Development Department, the Cultural and Tourism Fund, frequently referred to as the TOT Fund for transient occupancy taxes, Urban Development Department activities managed within the General Fund, the Airport Fund, Downtown Parking Fund, Leasehold Fund, and equipment reserves for the replacement of parking meters. The amount proposed in each fund is demonstrated on this slide. With a budget of $4.1 million in the general fund supporting more than 25 FTE, the Urban Development Department coordinates and manages a number of initiatives that focus on the outcome of a strong and diverse economy, including supporting business retention and expansion and growing minority-owned businesses with targeted outreach and aligning resources to address needs, including support for Live Bar through their expansion and relocation to the Garden Services Kitchen, and working with Haas Sauce, a local hot sauce manufacturer, to connect them with trade shows and opportunities to expand market exposure, as well as advising and mentorship. Strengthening efforts to support and facilitate business startup and business incubator networking activities and programming, including the virtual incubator program and Startup 411 and TechStars events, both planned for this spring and early summer, and ongoing outreach to the city's small business retention program. Retaining the Strategic Economic Development Corporation as Salem's primary business recruitment contact and enterprise zone manager for Salem. Exploring the feasibility of developing a high-speed broadband network in the downtown, and ongoing management of the city's parking assets in the downtown core, including meter spaces and garages. The At-Your Service section of the Strong and Diverse Economy Result Area reports how those initiatives have helped leverage recent expansions of Oregon Fruit Products and Pacific Office Automation, and supported the opening of Chi-Cha Brewing in West Salem. Staff are completing a business plan for the Salem Municipal Airport that will help guide future operations, business and development needs, and opportunities at the airport. The plan is expected to be complete this summer. And as noted in last week's presentation, more than $2.6 million in airport infrastructure projects are included in the fiscal year 2020 capital improvements budget. A small component of the Community Development Department's Permit Application Center contributes to the outcome of a strong and diverse economy through the issuance of licenses that are required for certain types of businesses, including street vending, mobile food units, pawn brokerages, and vehicles for hire. In addition, the Permit Application Center provides a centralized location for issuing parking permits. The total budget in this result area is $177,900 and just under 2 FTE. Most of the activities and programs supported by the Cultural and Tourism Fund, or TOT Fund, are included in the service area of Strong and Diverse Economy in recognition of their impact on tourism and its impact on Salem's economy. The Cultural and Tourism Fund dollars support convention center marketing, Salem tourism promotion, maintenance of and improvements to city-owned historic and recreational facilities, landscape maintenance at numerous city parks. The robust grant program supported by this fund that benefits historic and cultural amenities and provides funding for a variety of events in the community was included in last week's review of Welcoming and Livable Community. At $3.53 million, the top funding in this result area proposed for fiscal year 2020 includes $300,090 for convention center marketing, over $1 million for tourism promotion by Travel Salem, approximately $1.44 million in operational and capital project transfers for landscape maintenance and improvements to city parks, and $143,280 for maintenance of and improvements to city-owned historic facilities. That concludes my presentation of the Strong and Diverse Economy Result Area. Department representatives are available to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. The final item under special orders of business is an opportunity for the committee to continue. Question from Member Anderson.
Yes, and I guess I'll start on the urban renewal budget. First, I want to talk about or ask some questions about Fairview Industrial Park. It's reached its maximum indebtedness. All existing debt is retired. It's no longer being taxed like an urban renewal district, but we have $2.2 million available. So I got a couple of questions about that, especially because it says staff is currently working to identify options. Well, I kind of read that as maybe staff is scrambling to identify options, that you've got money, you got to spend it. So my question is, it's a compound question, sorry to the lawyers in the audience. Can this only be spent on that urban renewal district? Are there really projects that are potentially there? And what happens if we just say we spent all the money, all the projects are done? Would we then take that $2.2 million and distribute it back to the other members of the, entities that get taxed from that area? Which might be a nice PR move, by the way.
Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director. Yes, we have reached our maximum indebtedness and stopped collecting our tax increment for the Fairview Urban Renewal area. The reference to staff is looking at the options is largely tied to the work we're doing on the airport business plan. So we do have just over $2 million left in cash on hand. As we are preparing the airport, there's industrial land on the airport that needs investment to be ready for development. Like wetland mitigation, there are sites that need to be filled. There are areas that would be more likely to develop if taxiways were constructed. So we have held off on using any of the remaining Fairview money for grants, because we have had a grant program within Fairview and a loan program. We've held off on using those funds for that purpose, pending the completion of the airport business plan, to determine which projects on the airport would be most likely to stimulate new investment and development if we use these funds in that location.
So is that related in any way to the current effort that is being made by a certain part of our community to have commercial air there?
Not at all.
Good.
Not at all. No, the commercial service efforts that are underway could operate with the airport entirely as it is. Okay. What we're focusing on is really in bringing new investment and development to the airport to help the airport be more sustainable and increase our leasehold revenues.
Perfect, thank you. I have more, but I would defer to anybody else who wants to follow up on this particular area.
If I could go ahead and ask Member Hoy, and then back to you, Member Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Cook. When is the last time we actually closed an urban renewal area?
That would be the Pringle Urban Renewal Area, and that was closed prior to my coming to the city. I'm going to look to Renee to see if she has the dates.
And is that the only one we've ever closed?
I believe so, yes.
Good evening, Renee Frazier with Urban Development. I don't remember the exact year that we officially closed Pringle, but we stopped collecting increment in 92-93.
Thank you. 92-93. So I think I tried not to make it too much of a secret that I have sort of a love-hate relationship with urban renewal. I love what we can do with it. I love all of the businesses that we can help. I love all of that. But I hate what it does to the general fund. And I hate it when we're in the position to make budget cuts that we might not otherwise be in a position to have to make. And so I'm always, I think it's important that we pay close attention to those areas and close them when possible. And if they're doing, if they're doing a lot of great work, then I think we absolutely need to keep them. But if we're really trying to struggle to find work or projects, I think it's time to close them. That's just my opinion on it. So, thank you.
Member Anderson, followed by Member Kaiser.
It's mine too. And we've discussed this in past meetings. Then I would like to talk a little bit about the convention center, and I'm looking at page 7. you know, we have been told a number of times in a number of ways by a number of different people that the convention center is operating at a profit, doesn't need our money. And so I understand, is the convention center gain loss reserve what Kelly was talking about? It's just there in case the convention center loses money?
Yes, so the gain loss reserve fund was established for two purposes. One, as sort of a savings account in case there is a year when the convention center has an operational deficit.
Has that happened yet?
That has never happened.
Okay.
The second purpose is to fund capital improvement projects. Major capital improvement projects or smaller ones, if they need to buy new furnishings for the facility, new dinnerware, new curtains, whatever, they can use the gain loss reserve for that. So it's a set aside that comes out of their operational budget for future needs.
So are you saying that the convention center is the one that money is being taken from the convention center to put into this profit loss reserve?
So yes, from their operations, and it funds, it's like a savings account for the gain loss reserve. Now,
And it comes from them, not from Urban Renewal?
It does not come from Urban Renewal. There is a mechanism through our agreement for the convention center that if we're not achieving the funding goals, or if we fall below a certain threshold in the savings account, that TOT can backfill that. But it's not Urban Renewal, because now Urban Renewal can fund larger capital improvement projects.
I understand that, but we're talking about day-to-day operational expenses. And if it's coming from the convention center, why do we see it in the Urban Renewal budget?
It's an Urban Renewal facility. So everything, whether it is the marketing plan that supports the convention center, which is funded through TOT, or the gain loss reserve, which may have TOT funds, that all flows through the Urban Renewal Agency.
Well, then why don't we, if you're talking about they can use it if they need new silverware or new drapes and everything else, how is that different than saying we can use it if we need to paint our center or we need to do something else, when that should be coming from their regular operational funds? That's my question.
Yeah, it is coming from operations. It's not coming from tax increment. This is the gain loss reserve is not funded from property tax revenues. So tax increment, so what flows into the Urban Renewal area is the tax increment revenues that we collect. That is separate from the gain loss reserve fund.
Okay.
So tax increment revenue could not be used to buy or to subsidize operations. Let's say that that they're in the hole 1 year. You can't use Urban Renewal for that. The gain loss reserve fund, which is basically their savings account funded from their own operations, their own profit, then from that savings account they could fund their operations.
If I may, I think it was intended to be and still operates as a protection for the city, because statutorily we cannot use Urban Renewal money to fund the operations. It is a Urban Renewal city facility, so having that gain loss reserve protects the city from having to put in general funds if we had a down year or several years.
That's a very good explanation, thank you. And it's
Or
also
TOT.
good- Yeah, it's also good to know that the money that is sitting there right now is not our Urban Renewal funds. It's coming from their budget, because I know there is there's some feeling that this is funding losses of the convention center. So I'm very happy to know it is not. And not only that, even if it were funding losses, it would be it's a fund that is created during the profit-making years to make sure that if there are years when they don't make profit, they have someplace they can get it without working to the detriment of the city if, say, they decided we can't operate anymore.
Correct. Over the last few years, they've been funding this at $600,000 to $700,000 a year.
Okay. That's very good to hear.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Kaiser, followed by Member Nanke.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for some new projects in fiscal year 2020 in the Riverfront Downtown Urban Renewal area. And the first is the $2.5 million for Homeless Solutions Task Force. And just curious about any specific projects in mind for that funding?
Absolutely. So out of the Downtown Homeless Solutions Task Force, there were a number of recommendations made that were tied to capital improvements, providing toilet facilities, shower facilities, laundry facilities, those sorts of improvements. So this is money that we have allocated to support that sort of infrastructure.
Okay, and I'm guessing that further action by council would be necessary for actually put the specific projects
Correct.
to paper. All right. And then my second question was a carryover project, which was making State Street one-way to two-way. Is this the continuation of State Street from Liberty to 12th, or?
No, this is within the urban renewal boundary.
Just within the urban renewal,
Yes,
which
so taking it
extends
to Church.
To Church Street.
To Church Street,
Okay,
yes.
so it'd be Liberty to Church, and then it would continue to be one way at Church. On to 12th, perhaps.
Possibly a little bit further, depending on whether or not Public Works has some additional funds to bring to that project.
Thank you.
Member Anderson.
Thank you. Now I'd like to look at pages 9 and 10 of your report, which is the debt service. And I'm just curious, speaking in general, I'm looking at some of them. North Gateway apparently is the most prominent. But it looks like debt service was way up in 2018 and it's way down in 2000 adopted one, and it's way down on the proposed. So I think what is happening is we are paying lower amounts of money for debt services because we are paying down the principal?
No, that's not what
Shucks.
the debt service funds in urban renewal are. So because urban renewal, to spend
That's what
urban
happens on
renewal,
my mortgage.
to spend urban renewal funds, it has to be debt.
Yeah.
Okay, so debt service in urban renewal isn't necessarily like paying down your mortgage. It's the money that we're going to spend on projects.
Got it.
Okay, so it has to move through a debt instrument.
The higher debt service we have, that means we just had more projects going on.
Exactly, that's right. And
Okay.
in past years, we had some property acquisitions, we had a
Okay.
streetscape project.
All right. Thank you very much. I do have one more.
Member Anderson.
You and I and the city manager have talked a lot about getting some sort of hanging bike ped bridge to complete the pathway from Bush's Park all the way to Wallace Marine Park. And I see we've got money in this budget to destroy the concrete, monstrosities that go across the river there. And then on page 47 of your budget, it says committed to future projects. And there's $387,910 held in reserve for future projects specified in the approved plan for South Waterfront Urban Renewal Area. Would that by any chance be the hanging bike bridge?
This is more of a catch-all. It's not specified specifically to that project, so we don't know the cost or have estimates on that yet.
One time, we were
But
going to get an estimate from Public Works, weren't we?
We're getting closer. We're getting closer to this. We need to get that cap removed because that will allow additional development to occur where the Marquee site is. So we need to take care of that creek project. And then depending on funds that we have available moving forward in another fiscal year, probably not this upcoming fiscal year, then we're getting closer to that project.
And is the Marquee, I'm looking at the map, and it looks like the Marquee plan is in the, even though it's across the creek there, it's in the south waterfront urban renewal.
The Marquee site is in Riverfront. The creek is in South Waterfront. So it's right on the edge.
Okay, so is there any reason why that fund, since it's to develop something in the downtown urban renewal district, isn't coming from there as opposed to from the south waterfront?
Because you have to spend the project location for the creek restoration and removing that cap, that is in South Waterfront.
Got
So we
it.
can't use Riverfront money in South Waterfront.
Even though
Or vice
it's
versa.
for the benefit of a riverfront
Correct.
project? Who wrote these rules?
Mayor Member Bennett?
I just want to clarify, I certainly understand Councilor Anderson's description of this as a hanging bike bridge, but I want to make sure it's the pedestrian bridge we're talking about, essentially from Willamette University all the way through to Riverfront Park, then also connecting to Bush. It's the plan we've had for 15 years at least now.
The piece specifically, I believe Councilor Anderson is talking about, is a part of that whole system, but connecting the north side of the creek to the south side so that you can make a loop. Because there is a second phase of that project that once the cap is removed and the stream bank is restored, then there's an additional trail connection that will take you down to Riverfront Park. But that's a little bit further.
When will I be able to walk from 12th Street to Riverfront Park along Pringle Creek?
Eventually.
Well, I've been sitting here for over almost 12 years waiting to get some time beyond Liberty Street coming the other direction on State, so eventually doesn't work. So when will we see some dates on all of this stuff?
Step one is getting that concrete cap removed and the bank restored. So we're going through the permitting process right now so that we can work in that water during the in-water work period. Then we have to wait for more tax increment to grow within South Waterfront so that we've got the funds to complete the rest of that trail down to the Riverfront Park.
Despite the fact, as Councilor Anderson pointed out, it's on the riverfront side of the creek. Do I understand that correctly?
The trail that we're talking about is within the South Waterfront.
I understand that. That's a different trail. I'm talking about when do we have the walking trail down to Riverfront Park?
Yes, that's
Same
largely
trail?
within South Waterfront, same trail.
When do we get that?
It's contingent on revenue growing. So it's the challenge with South Waterfront urban renewal areas. Two things we have. It's largely built out, so we're not getting new development that's rapidly increasing the amount of tax increment we get. The new development that we have had is the apartment complex that is there, and that has received the MUTIP benefit for the property tax exemption for multifamily housing. So that's a 10-year window. So when those 10 years are up, we will see a big increase in tax increment, and then that will help facilitate completion of these projects.
I still am kind of confused by what's going on under the Commercial Street Bridge on the riverfront side, not the South Waterfront side. And that has always been my understanding as the connecting trail to get us down to Riverfront Park. And that is, you're saying, that's actually outside the water, the riverfront.
The urban renewal boundary kind of runs along the north side of the creek.
Okay.
That
was a bad mistake, that boundary.
And just today, I signed the agreement from the property owner who abuts the creek. The creek is actually privately owned. The Pringle Creek ownership predates statehood, so we had to have permission from the property owner. And I just signed that today. So once we get the permits that Kristen referred to, you should be seeing those piers and the concrete and all the junk down there being removed.
Thank you. And Member Nanke, are you sure? Because now's the time. Okay. Member Anderson.
I agree. I was a little too short in my description of what the hanging bridge is, because Director Rutherford and I have talked about that a lot before, but it is similar to the bridge that goes from the post office to City Hall,
right,
hanging down, and that one, it would be underneath Commercial Street, and it would allow people who are walking.
It's the one we've been talking about all these years. Okay.
And I will also say that I did say bike ped or ped bike path, but I will agree I emphasized maybe bike more than ped.
Well, I just want to make sure I understood which path we're talking about here.
Wonderful. So we can all agree that it's for human use, which is wonderful. So moving on to item 7C, I'd like to invite Budget Officer Jacobs to continue. Member Anderson.
Do we have questions on strong and diverse economy? I mean, we just talked about urban renewal so far.
7B, thank you.
I do, but maybe somebody else does too. I'd be happy to let them go first.
Member Sund.
Thank you. Can you explain the property acquisition? I think I'm in the right, yeah. Property acquisition from the general fund, the 411,890, what that is?
Let me get to the right place. So we're out of urban renewal budget, and
Oh, this is 142, so strong and diverse economy, urban development, property acquisition line there on page 142.
This, if I could?
Go ahead.
This is the program budget for the Urban Development Department.
Okay.
For the general fund, and that's actually a program, and it's in their real property section, so
Okay.
it's their real estate section. It's
So-
one of the programs in that section.
So what are the 2.74 FTEs? Those are just program FTEs?
Those are, yes, correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Some additional questions from Budget Committee? Member Anderson.
Thank you. This is not on urban renewal anymore, it's on safety. And I first have a question for the fire chief, and I know he's here someplace.
Member Anderson, if I can stop you, we haven't had the safety community or the Safe Community presentation yet.
Oh, it was the, okay.
That's
the
okay.
economy. Okay, sure.
We're all here to learn together.
So the chief can wait for a little bit.
Well,
Sorry.
I would like the record to show that, let's see, we're at 7B, and if there are no further questions, I'd like to invite Budget Officer Jacobs for 7C. Thank you.
I do have questions on 7B.
Member Anderson.
I'm looking at page 144 of the airport operations budget, the fund programs. There's a contingency that is unscored of $738 million, $738,000 on a projected total of 21,000. So it looks like 14. $140,000 is there, and then you have 700 and half that on a contingency. That seems like a pretty high contingency.
it is a pretty high contingency, and that is because the airport, as we look through the airport's 5-year CIP and projects that need to be done on the airport, we have to provide match amount for grants that we get. So airport projects are largely funded through the FAA, but we do have to have grant match
Okay,
for
so
that.
it's for the same sort of, well, it's not the same sort of projects we were talking about before in the urban renewal district, because those are for local things. This is in case we need to match something for the FAA says that we need to improve this.
Runways, taxiways, those sorts of improvements, yes.
Then my final question is on page 147. I'm looking at that nice picture there of the tulips and the hot air balloons over, hovering over it, and the description says, the park front building, which we gave almost $750,000 to, is a mixed-use building. Now, my understanding is that's totally an apartment, I mean, it's totally a business thing, and there are no apartments there.
That's correct. That's an incorrect
So
description.
I would like the
all
record to
office.
reflect
It
that
is
it's all office, it's
Yes.
not mixed use.
That's correct.
Thank you for that correction, Mr. Anderson. All right, and any other comments or questions from Budget Committee? Perfect, seeing none. Third time's a charm. Budget Officer Jacobs, I'd like to invite you for the service area budget review for Safe Community.
Great, let's talk about a safe community. So Safe Community is the final community-facing result area for the Budget Committee to review. Next week, we'll be talking about good governance, and we consider that kind of an internal-facing result area. So this is your final community-facing result area. It begins on page 87 of the budget publication. A safe community is one that provides emergency response while proactively reducing the risk of crime, fire, natural disasters, and health emergencies to residents, businesses, and property owners. With the exception of the infrastructure result area reviewed last week, the city dedicates the largest portion of available funding toward a safe community. The proposed 2020 budget recommends more than $113.39 million and 528.56 full-time equivalent positions directed to this result area. The total safe community budget equals 27.6% of the expense appropriated for all result areas. Position changes in this result area include the following. Discontinuation of the DARE program. The police officer currently in the position will be reassigned to a currently vacant position. This action represents a 1.0 FTE reduction in the police department's authorized position count. In response to increased construction demand, Building and Safety Division of the Community Development Department is adding 2 positions in fiscal year 2020, a plans examiner and a permit technician. And the reassignment of a vacant staff assistant position from the Community Development Department to the Municipal Court adds capacity for managing the expansion of the digital photo traffic enforcement program. The $113.39 million in safe community expenditures is shared among the departments providing emergency police and fire response, ambulance services, and the dispatching of 911 calls for 29 service agencies. Preparation within the community for natural disasters and other emergencies, permit processes and inspections to buildings in the community to ensure they're safe for occupants, removal or abatement of graffiti in coordination with other departments to address nuisances, and municipal court administration, criminal prosecution, and violation adjudication. I love the Project CAM. This is today at 11:15 a.m. The programs for the Salem Police Department that are supported in the general fund include 189 sworn and 44 civilian staff with a total appropriation of $46.8 million. The department continues to be challenged by a per capita rate of officers lower than 10 years ago as crime rates escalate by 21.9% over the same time period. Demand for service has increased along with the complexity of the needed response. Page 105 of the proposed budget provides a more detailed narrative of the many factors contributing to the challenges of our policing efforts. As this slide demonstrates, with an image from the Project CAM downloaded earlier today, construction of the new police station is well underway. Continuation of this project is included in the capital improvements budget reviewed last week at $48.5 million. The police department also oversees the operations of the city's radio communications and emergency dispatch services. Work continues on a new radio system that is compatible with standards for interoperability, allowing responders from different departments and agencies to communicate in emergency situations. A total of $3.5 million is appropriated in the capital improvements budget to complete this project. The Willamette Valley Communications Center's total operating budget of $12.7 million with 73 positions is supported by 29 rate-paying agencies. WVCC is moving forward on a number of technological and resiliency upgrades. The current phone system is being replaced with funding from the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. The computer-aided dispatch system has reached the end of its useful life, and a project to begin its replacement is appropriated in the capital improvements budget at $2 million, representing a $900,000 transfer from the Willamette Valley Communications Center operating budget, the budget we're reviewing this evening, and a $1.1 million internal loan. The Municipal Court Division of the City Manager's Office continues to look for ways to improve the efficiencies and effectiveness of its operations. The court utilizes video arraignment with the Marion County Jail and soon with the Polk County Jail to provide a more efficient and cost-effective option than transporting inmates from jail into the court. The Violations Bureau, where certain parking and minor traffic violations can be adjudicated through authority granted by judicial order, allows the presiding judge's time to be directed to more complex issues before the court. The municipal court's proposed budget is $2.1 million and includes 15 full-time equivalent positions. The Salem Fire Department continues to be challenged with significant year-over-year increases in call volume. Since 2015, call volume has increased over 27%. The growing demand for service 25,613 calls last year outpaces the available resources, resulting in a decline of 3.4% in 2018 and meeting the response time standard of 5.5 minutes, 85% of the time, for priority 1 emergency calls. The 5.5-minute response standard was achieved 70.9% of the time in 2018. This equates to nearly 1,700 people experiencing a critical emergency without a 5.5-minute response. The first quarter of 2019 continues the trend of increasing call volume. The reopening of Station 11 in January of 2019 is providing needed emergency response capability to assist with the increased demand. If the call volume growth rate continues, a further decline in the department's ability to maintain the current level of response is anticipated. The fire department's fiscal year 2020 proposed budget in the general fund is $35.9 million and includes 170 sworn and 7 civilian staff. The $1.15 million budget proposal for the Emergency Medical Services Fund includes a $250,000 expense for purchasing 15 auto-pulse resuscitation units. The auto-pulse system provides high-quality automated CPR to victims of sudden cardiac arrest. The technology provides continuous resuscitation on the move in steep stairwells, cramped spaces, and in ambulances. This technology, in conjunction with several other interventions, has been proven to significantly increase the chances of survival from sudden cardiac arrest. In the absence of sufficient operating revenues generated by the city and partner agencies, adding the community resource of a 24-hour-per-day sobering center has been postponed. The city's previous pledge of $200,000 is not included in the fiscal year 2020 budget proposal. The Building and Safety Fund, representing a division of the Community Development Department, administers State of Oregon building codes and City of Salem revised codes, which provide uniform standards to ensure newly constructed residential and commercial buildings are safe. With an operating budget of $5.7 million and 24.56 FTE in this result area, the division has a corps of plans examiners and inspectors certified in multiple disciplines to provide efficient processing and well-rounded review of construction projects. The fiscal year 2020 budget will serve as the authorizing action to create a new city fund. The Traffic Safety Fund appears on page 103 of the Safe Community Result Area and pages 308 and 309 of the financial summaries. This new fund allows the city to segregate the revenues and program costs associated with the current photo red light enforcement efforts and a planned expansion of this safety service. During fiscal year 2020, photo red light will be expanded to 3 additional approaches, and speed on green photo enforcement will be initiated at 1 location with the possibility of additional locations implemented simultaneous to the expansion of photo red light or during the fiscal year. An increased level of enforcement will correspond to increased volume of citations and will require additional capacity in the police department, the finance section, and municipal court. Costs for the increased capacity will not be incurred until system expansion is operational. The expenditure budget for this new fund is $1.9 million in fiscal year 2020. And that concludes my presentation of the Safe Community Result Area budget. And department representatives are standing by to take your questions.
Thank you, Budget Officer Jacobs. It looks like there are some questions. Councillor Hoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to take a little bit deeper dive into the workforce changes in the municipal court section. You mentioned that we're reducing a neighborhood position in the Neighborhood Enhancement Division and transferring that over to the court. And I would like to understand the impact of that on the Neighborhood Enhancement Division first, and then I have some follow-ups.
Sure. And I'll respond to you what I know, and if we need supplemental information, I think Director Wright would probably then provide that. But this position was originally designated to be eliminated this year. The staff assistant position in the Neighborhood Enhancement Division was initially, it's vacant, and it was initially intended to be eliminated. And so when we realized we were going to implement the expansion of photo red light and the implementation of speed on green, and we knew we needed the capacity in the municipal court, rather than eliminating that position, we transferred it to the municipal court to add that capacity, and the position will be paid for from the proceeds in that traffic safety fund. So this was a position that was originally intended to be eliminated.
Understood, thank you. And perhaps Mr. Director Wright could give us a little bit more information, because I'm just concerned because I see it in the Neighborhood Enhancement Division, and I get a lot of feedback from the neighborhood associations about, and not good feedback, about the decrease in service that they feel like they're experiencing. And so I just want to understand what this impact is going to be and how it's going to impact our neighborhood associations, if at all.
Yes. Community Development Director Norman Wright. The impact is definitely felt by Brady and his team with neighborhood enhancement, just like all other four positions that are slated for a cut with this budget in community development. The position had been originally basically our frontline receptionist. We are modifying some of our practices as a result of basically eliminating the front lobby reception. We've also instituted some significant changes, as this person was our main reception for all of our phone calls. We've instituted some efficiency gains with some work with IT for a new phone tree, some new automated response systems, that sort of thing. But no mistake about it, we have less people that are able to answer the calls, and we certainly do have more cases, more caseload that Brady and his team and the various code officers are trying to get to at every point.
In response, however, to the question about neighborhood association support, there is no impact, and to have impact will require a reprogramming of that full-time equivalent to neighborhood association support, and really a choice between neighborhood association support and traffic enforcement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wright. I had an additional follow-up with the 2 FTE positions for building safety. Given the growth and increase in permits, is that enough to keep up with the demand? Just curious.
Yeah, that is our hope, certainly. But this month we're already seeing that the volume is increasing even more than we anticipated. So we're remaining flexible, and that fund is healthy enough that we can respond as needed. But we remain cautious as well to make sure that we don't add unless we absolutely see that the data shows and justifies the need.
And so just to be clear, if someone is doing remodeling or building, they have to go through that permit process, and they are subject to the timeline based on our inspections for capacity. Is that correct?
That is correct. And currently we are meeting all of our service standards for inspections, for plan reviews, and our customer satisfaction, at least as reported to me, has been very good so far. We are seeing a strain, though, so I don't want to gild this lily more than necessary. But again, that fund and its health is enough for us to be able to respond to that when we need to.
Thank you, Director Wright. Member Mayor Bennett?
I've got a couple of things. I do want to follow up on the inspections. So during the year, if you see a need, will you all come back to us and talk to us about whether you need to put a person into a spot to keep up with it to meet your targets?
For building and safety?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
If that's needed, of course. There are instances where we may be able to do this administratively, but if it does require council action, we will absolutely bring it here without hesitation.
Do you contract out, or how do you handle it? I mean, do you have a quick way to turn around if you fall behind?
We do have a quick way if necessary.
Okay.
And we are actually discussing some expansions right now actively. So we may be back soon. But for right now, whether it's with contracting or whether it's just with the great staff that we have that are cross-trained in just about every permit and every inspection type, we're staying pretty flexible at the moment.
Well, one of the things that has been very helpful for us, I think, as a basic economic development tool, has been your department's ability to respond to the needs of construction in the community. It's talked about beyond our borders.
Absolutely.
What a good job you all are doing. So I hope you'll keep us in touch with any problems you have so that it doesn't deteriorate. It's very important that this be well done. I want to ask about one other area, and I'll have probably some others, but I wanted to say how much I appreciate seeing the graffiti program in place. It's not yours. It was. You could have it back, but the chief got it, and I'm just curious what's going on there. We had We had a very active graffiti program, 2,600 incidents it looked like. We took a trip down to Riverfront Park this weekend, and that number went way up down at Riverfront Park on concrete, on all kinds of stuff. And it's beginning to feel like maybe there was a break in that service. And I just want to underscore how important I think that is to all of us, that this place not look like some of the other towns that have not done this kind of broken window type policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Jerry Moore, Chief of Police. We currently do not have the position of our graffiti coordinator filled right now, and we haven't had it filled for about 3 months. And so we're utilizing one or two interns to try and take care of the problem. So that may be one of the reasons. They're actually trying to do a very good job keeping up with the issues that we're confronted with regarding graffiti. And occasionally we have someone that will strike an area and they'll do a whole bunch of graffiti, and sometimes it takes time to get to it. Sometimes it isn't ours. And so we have to deal with those issues as well.
Yeah, I just want to assure you, Chief, that as I travel around town, for some reason, they seem to have chosen my travel route for their graffiti. And so that's all I'm seeing, whether it's on Safeway or down at the park or on other boxes. I just want to assure you that it is noticeable that we haven't had a program, the kind of program we had for 3 months, and really need to get someone into that position and get this back under control, because it can kind of go to hell in a handbasket pretty fast.
I agree.
And it really is not. We have other unsightly issues, but that one's one we can really control. Thank you.
You bet.
Member Hoy?
Thank you. The second half of my question was regarding the addition of the transfer of the position to the court. And I'm curious how we determine that we need one entire FTE for what I understand is a handful of new intersections that are going to be subject to photo radar and photo red light. So I'm just curious, do we really need an entire, I would just like to hear more about that. Do we need an FTE for that?
Thank you for that question. So it's actually going to be more than a handful. We anticipate that it'll be a greater volume than we're currently dealing with the existing photo red light locations. So we feel like we're going to be seeing a lot of activity warranting this addition, but the position won't be added until, won't be funded, I should say. We won't expend any dollars, we won't hire anyone until the implementation has occurred and we get some idea of what kind of volume we're experiencing. So we won't hire anyone until the program is underway. But we do expect to see quite a significant increase in volume, double what we're experiencing now.
And just a point of clarification with the red light cameras, when they are on an intersection that...
I'm going to defer to Chief Moore.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I would love to hear more about the green light program, but specifically with the red light cameras and the green light program, in intersections that we cross state highway, Mission, Trade, Ferry, would the revenue still come to us if it's on state highway? Is it only the one-way, two-way? Are you understanding the?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If you could just.
The revenue comes to the city of Salem because there are programs. We have to get permission, if you will, when it's ODOT highways or streets. But once we have that permission, there are cameras, and any costs or revenue are ours.
Thank you. Did you want to hear more?
Yeah, what streets are going to be under the green light program? What's that? Describe that for me.
Sure. Well, we currently have 3 photo red light intersections, Silverton and Fisher, Commercial and Marion, and 25th and Mission. All three of those are photo red light. We're going to add 3 additional intersections, Commercial and Kubler, Commercial and Madrona, and Center and Hawthorne. And so all 6 of those will have photo red lights. It is our plan to introduce speed on green at each of those intersections. And speed on green utilizes the same cameras that photo red light utilizes. But what it does is it measures speed. So as you all know, sometimes when the light turns yellow, rather than stop, people accelerate through the intersection. So it will allow us to have the ability to view the speeds of people that are going through those intersections. And and so at a certain level, we will issue citations for speeding through the intersections.
And Chief Moore, just like with the red light, that would go to the owner of the vehicle, not necessarily the driver?
Well, we only issue the citations to the drivers. We have our reserve officers that run the program do their due diligence to try and identify who the driver is, and we issue the citation to the driver. If we can't identify who the driver is in a certain car, we don't issue a citation.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Yes, a question about DARE. When I was younger, DARE played a really important role in our high school, and I think it continues to do so. Last week, when we were talking about the roof in this building, we talked about how preventive care is so much more cost-effective than catastrophic fixes. I read your response to the email, and I understand that you support DARE, but with DARE being canceled, is there another program available that might be able to help children resist the temptation of drugs and alcohol?
Well, that's a interesting question. If you're asking if there's another program within the Salem Police Department, we don't have another program like DARE. We do have officers in the schools. They interact with the students. They teach some classes regarding drug activity or the dangers of it, but it's nowhere near what the DARE program would offer. The schools, I think, through their health classes and some of those things certainly address the dangers of drugs, as do, I'm sure, many of the teachers. But we'll put out information. What used to be our crime prevention unit or our social media folks will put out things occasionally about the dangers of drugs. But we don't have another program like DARE, if that was your question.
Yeah. Just one other question, if I may. This deals with the photo red light and now the speed on green. Given how efficient that can be, is there any reason for us to roll it out more aggressively? I mean, or is there the possibility of doing that?
Well, there's a possibility that we could put it at every intersection, but I think we're going to be conservative with that. I think we've always tried to pick intersections that we think where we have the most dangers for speed and traffic accidents, and we'll continue to do that. This isn't while there is on occasion revenue from this program, that's not what the program was designed to do. This program was designed to keep people safe as they're driving and help us negotiate traffic safety when our officers can't be available. So we'll always look at if we have accidents at a particular intersection or we have issues, we will certainly look at whether that can be expanded.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Member Nordyke.
Thank you, Chief Moore, for being here. I do have some questions for you. Page 90 states that the response time for priority 1 and 2 calls is 8 minutes, 40 seconds. And I'm just curious, how does that response time compare to other similarly situated metropolitan areas?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know how it compares to other agencies. I do know that it's probably about 3 minutes longer than what we averaged many, many years ago. And I say many, many years ago, within the last 5 years or so. It's a reflection on how busy our officers are. It's a reflection on additional calls for service. And of course, it's a reflection on our staffing.
And priority 1 and 2 calls, what are those?
Well, they are basically, the best answer I can give you are priority 1 and 2 calls are calls that are in progress, where it needs an immediate response. That's the best way I can put it.
Okay. Now, how many of your officers are currently retirement eligible?
As we speak today, there's 10 that are eligible, and within the next 20 months, there'll be another 15. So if nobody retired today or in the next 2 years, we'd have 26 people. Someone will retire in the next 2 years.
Apparently
No, that was your assumption.
Now, Leslie, the police budget, at least according to the summary of proposed expenditures for the fiscal year 2020, indicates that you account for roughly a third of the city's budget. I'm just curious, if anything is on the horizon for your department that might substantially alter your budget forecast, because slight shifts in your budget could have an overall impact larger than, say, the library department.
I don't see anything. Obviously, the city manager's budget doesn't show any increases. In fact, it shows the loss of an officer in this year's budget. And I certainly pay attention to what goes on in our forecast. So that's probably a question I can't answer very well.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Member Barker, followed by Member Anderson.
Okay, on page 90, excuse me. Thank you. On page 90, it says that crashes, fatal injury, and property. What period of time are these numbers for?
I think that was 2018.
So calendar year 2018 or fiscal year 2018?
Calendar.
Okay. Because it seems like there's been an awful lot of fatalities so far in 2019. And the other thing I wanted to address was the DARE program. As I look at our budget and I look at the DARE position going away, I think we're being very short-sighted because it's going to cost a whole lot more down the road. We've seen what the homeless population is going to be, and if we can keep children off of drugs and profitable in the society, it's going to cost us a whole lot more down the road if we don't have a program such as this. And I see several changes in here that are totally affecting our youth, and I think we're shortchanging our youth and kind of leaving them out in the world.
Thank you, Member Barker. Member Anderson, followed by Member Kaiser.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks for the good work that you and your department do. I do have a question, though, about the statistical analysis on page 105. When you talk about reported Part 1 and Part 2 crimes, and I'm not sure what they are, but they're lesser crimes, you take a 10-year average, but when you talk about violent crimes, you start in 2010 instead of 2005. And 2010 looks to me to be the lowest year ever, and that's how you get the 45% going from 2014, going from 2014 to 2018, and 2018 is the lowest year. If you start over in 2009 and a 10-year average, by my rough calculations, instead of 45% rise, it's 25% rise. So I'm just curious as to why you picked a different year than you picked in the different kind of crimes, and why it just happened to be the lowest year ever.
Well, I think I'm not sure exactly why we picked those years, but I think we just tried to show the huge increase in the last.
No, I understand there's an increase. Even under going 10 years back, it's 25% increase. So you've got a very much increased load, but it just sounds a little more dramatic at 45%, because it looks like you had a high and then you've swung down and now you're going up again, and you're going up on everything. But 25% is bad enough to me, not just 45%. Thanks.
Member Kaiser.
Thank you. I'm going to move off from the police department. So you're out of the hot seat for next. I'm going to go back to the municipal court because I'm trying to better understand what Member Hoy was bringing up as far as this position moving there, and trying to understand exactly, maybe I'll just put it in plain English, is what is this position going to do? So how does that work now? I always thought with the red light cameras that we procured a service so somebody actually like going out to the intersections, removing the film, bringing it back. How does that work? What's that process?
I'm going to look at my coworkers.
Let's not be too.
I don't know how it works.
Let's make sure we don't.
But I'd like to understand how that new program is going to affect why we would need another person specifically within the municipal court.
Sure. So let me back up. So rather than shooting from the hip in regard to data and statistics, currently for photo red light, we have 345 citations a month for photo red light. That's up per month. So with the new installations, we're looking at an additional 540 per month. plus speed on green, approximately $2,800 per month. So we need to add capacity in courts, and we need to ensure we have capacity in finance to receive those payments. And we need capacity in police for the reserve officers who actually view all of those citations.
So my question, I guess, again, is what is that position in the municipal court doing? Are they adjudicating that? I don't understand how that works.
Understood, and I'm not an expert.
All right.
So let me defer to Deborah Ingledew, who is the court administrator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Aiken, Salem Municipal Court. I'm going to give you the top overview. Cases get filed with our court electronically from the photo red light system, and that'll be the same with speed on green. Some of the tickets get resolved by mail. People just plead, cite, pay, take care of it. Some come into the court and deal with it at the Violations Bureau, and so they're seeing court staff adjudicating it there. Some come into the courtroom, they see a judge, whether it's me or someone else. But the operational piece of adjudicating a ticket from beginning to end is court staff, and they handle about 90% of the flow of the cases. About 3% of the photo red light tickets go to a trial. And so that's about, on the photo red light, I think that's about 20 trials a week. So if you double that, that's another 20 trials or more if you have the same 3 to 5% trial rate on the speed on green or on additional photo red light sites. That amounts to another 4-hour block of trial time for a judge to handle, and then the clerks to adjudicate electronically and through the process. I think it's about 95 to 97% are adjudicated without a trial. And so that's the staff, the court staff, who are dealing it with through the mail, pay, and some of that. They have delegation orders from me where if the person's pleading, they can look up the traffic record, they can make the fine reduction on the scale that I've set out, and not have to see a judge to get that. We are going to implement a standard payment plan so they don't have to see the judge for some of the payment plans that they have to see now to make it more efficient. The court staff handle that. In more detail, Deborah did the calculations based on the flow of numbers and what court staff do, so I'm going to turn that to her for a little bit more in the weeds.
Deborah Ingledew, Court Administrator. There are additional services that we provide, so we're going to see an increase in the number of people that actually come into the court. Judge Aiken was a little low on the numbers that actually come in or the numbers that actually go to trial. It's a little bit higher than that. I don't have that exact number in my head, so I'll have to get back to you on that. It's also an additional person that has to do the records management. For every single trial that happens, or for every hour in court with a judge, it's 2 hours worth of staff time to finish prepping the files and create the permanent record for that file. It's also the increased number of telephone calls that we receive and the population that come in. Just so you know, the court handles in excess of 40,000 calls a year, and you know, that's pretty amazing that we've done it with a staff of 12 over the last few years, because in the FTE count, the judge is one of those FTEs and myself is the other. But frontline staff and they're all taking those phone calls. So we expect that there will be a lot of questions, especially when we go to the speed on green, that there will be a lot of customers. I say customers, clients, defendants. You can pick your choice. Yeah, individuals that will come to court or call, and so we are going to get essentially, excuse the expression, hammered without the ability to add that staff person so that we can offset some of the extra services that we're going to have to provide.
Thank you. If I may dig in just a little bit more, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, so in the budget here, the FTE count, you've broken out court proceedings, criminal court proceedings, violations. These red light, speed on green, which category do they fall into? Are they criminal? Are they violations?
Well, that would be violations.
Okay. And then what is that criminal category? What is that?
Well, I'm going to let
exactly?
Judge Aiken respond to that because she's the one that has the law degree.
She's being very shy, but the reality is the criminal cases are the 5 major traffic misdemeanors: DUI, reckless driving, driving while suspended, attempting to elude, and a hit and run. Failure to carry and present a driver's license is a Class C misdemeanor. The others are all Class A. So Class A's are up to 1 year in jail, $6,250 maximum fine. The failure to carry and present a driver's license is $1,250 and up to 30 days in jail. So we do those misdemeanors under the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code that has been adopted by the council in its entirety, but we only handle misdemeanors, not felony-related traffic offenses. And then those misdemeanors adopted by the council under the Salem Revised Code would include things like trespass, vagrancy, alcohol in the parks, peeing in public, and disorderly conduct, and things that you have made misdemeanors under the Salem Revised Code. And those currently have a $500 fine cap and 6 months jail is the maximum that could be imposed.
Okay. And just one last real quick, just curious, in kind of discussing the topic among friends who live in other cities, is it common for a municipality to adjudicate those types of criminal cases?
Short answer is yes.
How does that work typically within other cities within the state?
Well, we're one of 4 cities in the state that still has an elected judge. The other municipalities have, under the Chapter 221 of the Oregon Revised Statutes, they've created municipal corporations that have judges who are on contract or appointed by the city council or the city manager, whatever their governing statutes require. And so it's each individual city that decides for themselves what they're going to make misdemeanors. Some cities only handle violations, some do both, and I would estimate, and it's just off the top of my head, but about half of the municipal cities in the state of Oregon have both dockets, criminal and violation. But we're one of the largest and highest volume municipal courts in the state. And so as you get down to some that operate 1 day a week, the volume certainly drops off. And if I can, just one correction or maybe an addition on the speed on green or photo red light. As I understand what I've heard of the program, if the speed on green is capturing someone at 11 to 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, that's a Class C violation. The legislature sets what's a Class A, B, C, D violation. They set the presumptive fines and the maximum and minimum amounts. So a Class C violation would have a base fine of $165. The court has the authority, the judge, to raise or lower the fines under various circumstances. Out of whatever is imposed, I believe under the current fine distribution scheme, $66 goes to the state and county, and I believe it's the first $66 that's collected, and then the balance comes to the city. So if I took a $165 ticket with someone who had no prior record and reduced it to the minimum fine of $85, $66 is going to the state and the county, the balance come to the city. So it's not free money, it's not a cash cow, it's not a revenue generator in that sense, it's a traffic safety program, and it encompasses all the costs of the law enforcement, finance department, city attorney's office, what role they play, and the court.
Thank you.
Member Hoy, followed by Member Anderson, Member Nordike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Judge, for, I have questions for you. No, yes, sorry. Or the administrator.
Deborah's here, so.
Either one, either one. I was curious about, we're in a time of cuts right now in the city. We're in a really tight budget, and I know that there are services that you provide that could be provided by the circuit court. And I'm wondering, have you considered transferring some of those criminal prosecutions or criminal cases to the circuit court, or instead of keeping them here locally?
The short answer is that's not my call to make. That's the job of the city council to decide what cases are going to be tried in this court and what the city manager may recommend on the budget. The Oregon Motor Vehicle Code basically comes as a package deal. If you're taking the code and we're enforcing that, those could be transferred if the city chose to do that through the city manager. The council might want to look at that. I'm not saying you should.
Understood.
There are reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. I won't go into that. I'll be happy to meet with anyone who wants to talk about the efficacy of that. With respect to the city revised code misdemeanors, the state's not taking them now.
Right.
So if you want the trespass enforced, if you want the parks enforced with the alcohol issues, if you want those disorderly conducts enforced, we're the ones doing it. But that's the council's call, not mine. I don't propose that aspect. I just try to tell you, here's how we have to do it to be lawful, and here's how we need to do with staffing levels or pro tem judge levels are my duties to do it timely within the due process scheme of things and the standards that are set in fairness to all.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on speaking of the pro tems, how many pro tem judges do we have?
Well, we currently have on our roster, I believe it's 7 or 8, 7. That's not 7 full-time pro tem judges. That's just a rotation of available, well-qualified persons who would approve by your council to serve in my absence or when we have extra dockets.
One of the things that's concerned me is that I noticed that the pro tem budget's up to $117,000 this year, which seems like quite a lot. So I'm concerned about. It seems like we're expanding that beyond our capacity, and I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm going to give you some top-line information on that. I'll let you ask those questions. If you want deeper stuff, we can deep dive for you.
Sure.
The current program, the total base budget we're talking about is $117,780. Court administrator broke that out as $94,640 for pro tem judges serving on a second docket. So I can't be in 2 courtrooms at the same time, so those are second dockets. Or like on Tuesdays, Judge Olson is here on the regular docket in the main courtroom. In the mornings, I'm doing administrative things, which is a whole host of things. Afternoons, I'm doing violation trials here. So on Mondays, there's only 1 judge, that's me. On Tuesdays, we have 2. Wednesdays, first and third Mondays, I'm doing the jury trials that are scheduled. And we have a judge handling the regular docket. Second and fourth Wednesdays, I'm doing the regular docket. And we have a pro tem judge doing about a half day or so for settlement conferences, motion hearings, and things of that nature. On Thursdays, we have 1 judge in the courtroom, 1 doing administrative aspects and working on our community court program and other administrative functions. Friday mornings, I'm doing violation trials. Judge Hellowell's doing the regular arraignment docket, and then I'm doing violation trials in the afternoon. Now, that's the $94,640. Deborah's added the $5,650 increase in hours to support the new speed on green and photo red light. We have enough capacity in our current budget and how we've handled the trials and what's being filed and what's going to trial to absorb some of the new cases. For example, yesterday I had 2 trials an hour, not 4 trials an hour scheduled. So we have capacity there, but based on the numbers you've heard from Kelly, that's a whole lot more coming down the pike, even if you think 3 to 5% would be the number going to trial. Then the last chunk of that 117 is $17,490 attributed for when the elected judge has time off. If I'm sick, if I'm on vacation, and those other categories, the courtroom judges in courtroom 2 can't be in both places, so you have to be able to backfill that. I hope that gives you, that's a top line. Deborah can give you more details.
Thank you, that's great.
Member Anderson.
Thank you. Judge, I'm curious about the $250,000 set aside for a future replacement of the municipal court's information system. So is that, and maybe this is more a question for Kelly, is
That's
that
out of my
money?
pay grade to talk about that. That's Kelly or Deborah.
Is that money that is just sitting there, or is it?
That's money that doesn't exist.
Okay.
So it's not only not sitting there, it doesn't exist.
Okay, so it's in the budget, though?
It's in the budget. If we implement photo red light and speed on green, as we've been discussing, then the revenue projections would allow us potentially to create those 2 set-asides that are in the budget, the $250,000 for the municipal court, so that the court could either upgrade or replace its information technology system, which is needed. And then we have another $250 for the police.
Yeah, good. I knew that Judge Aiken couldn't answer that half of the question.
Right.
So, but they're both for the stoplight stuff?
We're using the traffic safety fund as a means to fund those.
So, that's $500,000.
That's correct.
And so that is $500,000 increase in our budget, even if it's money we don't have right now.
That is correct. It's appropriation authority, yes.
Yeah. So what happens if we don't use that?
Well, I would suggest that if the Budget Committee recommends this budget and the council adopts it, if we receive the revenue as we're anticipating, those reserves would be part of that adopted budget, so we would use them. We would use that appropriation authority.
For something else?
No. What I'm saying is, if you adopt a budget that has that $250,000 set aside for the municipal court information system, we would create that set aside if we have revenue to support it. We have to realize the revenue first from this new activity before we can do that set aside. So I feel like I'm not answering your question.
Well, no, maybe I'm not understanding it, and I'm looking at Member Tigan. He may have an answer to that.
Well, I guess that maybe the thought is we're creating a new fund where the money's going into. Where does the money go into right now? Yeah. That it's not. And if you didn't create the new fund, where would the money go?
That's a different question, and that's a good question too. They're both good questions. So the photo red light revenues, just for the current installations, that money is being received in the general fund in this current fiscal year. So the program costs are being incurred in the general fund, and the revenues are being received in the general fund. With the expansion, we opted to create this new fund so we could very specifically segregate the dollars so that you would see it. It would be very transparent. So I think that answers, does that answer your question, Member Tigan? Yes. So in respect to your question.
Yes, and how did you arrive at the $250,000 figure for each?
It was simply an estimate. For the court system, we don't know at this point how much it may cost to replace that system. For the police vehicle reserve, we do know that we are very under-reserved there, and that the reserve will actually be exhausted in about 5 years for police vehicles. So by being able to add this infusion of $250,000, it actually will help that reserve last a little bit longer so that we can replace our police vehicles.
So I remember in budget years past, we had a long, attenuated discussion of about, do we want to keep police cars for 5 years or 6 years or 8 years, and how much different that makes. And this kind of relates to that, because the higher we build up the reserve, the sooner and appropriately sooner we can replace cars that need to be replaced.
I would agree with you, yes. Okay. We do some pretty extensive forecasting relative to vehicle replacement.
I guess my question is, we're, as we always do on budgets, no matter what it is, whether it's the priority-based budget that we've been using for the last few years or when it was more silo-based, we as the Budget Committee and then as the council spend a lot of time on small amounts of money. Nothing has been as bad as the $20,000 on the bocce ball courts that we spent a whole lot of time. But, there's when I look at this and see here's $500,000 that is in our budget, and it makes our budget higher, which then makes the forecast of we're going to have trouble sooner. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay.
No, because you're talking about two different funds. This is a separate fund from the general fund. This is a traffic safety fund. Okay. The general fund, completely different issue.
Okay.
And so we're using some of the funding from the traffic safety fund to offset some of the costs that exist in the general fund for the administration of the photo red light, current program, expanded program, and speed on green.
So what would happen if we would say, let's reduce this from $250,000 in each case to $200,000 in each case? Would that be possible? Would that give us another $100,000 from the general fund to spend on something else? And
no, it would not.
Tigan saying no. Okay.
It would not.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, another question. Sorry, Budget Officer Jacobs. Member Hoy.
Oh, actually, my job. So it's all good.
Thank you for being in your job. And Member Hoy.
Thank you. Excuse me. Member Anderson was delving into the territory I wanted to get into. So I understood that those funds weren't restricted funds that you're planning to put into that new fund. Are they actually restricted funds?
Are you talking about the current receipts from photo red light?
The potential new receipts.
The potential new receipts would not be restricted funds, and they're not actually, I guess, restricted if we put them in this traffic safety fund either. That doesn't necessarily restrict them, but a couple of things. This is simply appropriation authority right now because everything is an estimate in terms of what we will realize with this fund. And the point of the fund, or not the point of the fund, but the point of the service is behavior modification. So we may see some pretty significant revenue as we fully implement this program, but I think the hope from the police department is we would see that revenue decline as you see behavior modification and fewer citations.
I understand that, thank you. But the point is that would be we would be self-imposing a restriction by putting it in a separate fund. We could, as a budget committee and council, decide to fund, say, a youth development coordinator out of that money. I'm not suggesting that we should, I'm saying we could.
Yes.
Now I'm suggesting we should.
Yes, I'm sensing it's a suggestion, and so what I would offer is, again, there is certainly some flexibility with this fund. We are using the dollars from this fund. We're proposing to use them to offset some costs already existing in the general fund. So again, with the fund and the point of it, hoping for behavior modification and a decline in revenue eventually, we would potentially be using one-time funds for an ongoing expense.
Understood. And with the current photo radar, have we seen that revenue decline?
Oh, golly, yes. And it never met the aspirations either. The original estimates for revenue, we never met the original estimates. So that's why you hear an abundance of caution from me.
Thank you. I appreciate that caution.
Member Bennett.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Chief Niblock a question just about, hate to see him sit here all evening and not get asked anything. Chief, could you, again, Kelly gave us the statistics, but again, underscore your ability to respond? I mean, I understand there were improvements because of the reopening of 8 and 11, but where are we now? Are we really falling behind again? And if so, what do we do next?
So certainly the reopening of those two stations has helped us, but we're treading water. We have, for many years, have been around the 74%, and the goal is 85%, 5.5 minutes at a time. So we've been 10 or 11% below what council wants us to do. This year, for the first time, we dropped to 70.9, so we went down 3.4%. And when she gave the numbers of 1,700, that represents between 70.9 and 85 represents 1,700 people in the community who have a critical priority 1 emergency, breathing problem, heart attack, stroke, where time matters for them, house fire, where we don't get there in 5.5 minutes to deliver the intervention that we need to. If you go all the way to 100%, because that's the reality, it's 3,500 people a year don't get that 5.5 minute response. So, but our goal is the 85th percentile, and that's 1,700. So what's happened is we have had the last 4 or 5 years, we've had almost double-digit increase in our volume. 9.3% last year. We're already up 600 calls from last year in the first 4 months of the year. Every call type, medical, fire, they're all up. So we're seeing an increase in demand. And so, you can only do so many things with so many resources. And we're adding enough calls right now that you may remember last year I said based on 2018 numbers, if we add Engine 11, we could see these kinds of increases. Well, those increases are no more because we're adding another 2,000 calls for service. And so that's really our challenge, is how do we best cover the calls that we have. And we are doing some things to try to make ourselves more available for the priority calls. We have about 13,000 priority 1 calls a year out of that 25,000. The other calls are still important, but they're not the critical, life-threatening calls. Those are the ones we really want to get to. Those are the ones we time ourselves on. Right now we have a second alarm structure fire going on out south. We have 7 engine companies, 2 ladders, 2 BCs, a medic unit, an air unit there fighting that fire. So the remaining resources are handling the whole city. That leaves 3 or 4 engines to cover the whole city. So those are the kind of challenges we have.
Go ahead. No,
Okay,
no.
I assume then you're planning forward for an additional, whether it's engine company or two engine company or whatever you're looking at, or moving stations around. I mean, are we getting a sense of where we didn't get your map this year, so I don't know where all this is going on exactly, but
We have that map. We can certainly provide that map to council and the budget committee.
I think it's helpful to see that
Sure.
map each year.
It
Just to
hasn't
keep
changed
up.
a lot.
Okay.
The outlying areas are more a challenge for us than the central part of town. What we, to be able to try to meet the council's response time standard right now, today, we would need 3 more engine companies in service at a minimum, and more staffing and training and DFMs and those kind of things to be able to meet that standard. So, with the budget challenges we have, it's difficult to say, hey, we need 3 more engine companies. That's just not our reality.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a kind of a concerning forecast. I hope, because I saw you do it once before, that, or probably you do it all the time, but the kind of telephone triaging that goes on at 9/11, trying to, at the communication center, trying to make sure that we're getting really a clear picture to your people, what they're being called out for, and that there's been a selection carefully.
We are constantly evaluating other alternatives that are out there right now. We are looking at the possibility of applying for a grant. There's a federal grant that's going to be coming out for 40 communities in the United States to put a new program out there. So we're evaluating that program right now. It's a more thorough medical evaluation at the dispatch center.
Okay.
And there's a triage that goes on, and the lower acuity calls, which is about 2,000, 3,000 calls for us a year. So it's not going to stem the tide, but if we could take those lower acuity calls and send a basic life support type unit that was funded maybe through the city and the hospital, a joint kind of a thing, or Falk ambulance, those are some things we're looking at that we hope to try to stem the tide of the growth. I don't know that we're going to be able to stem it completely, but we are always evaluating where could we send a different resource to deal with the issue and keep the paramedics available for the most priority calls.
Well, I'm sure we'll all look forward to your analysis and recommendation on this, because it is, when you say something like 1,700 people not getting the service in time, it does catch you right up. I mean, these are our neighbors. And
keeps me up at night.
If not us. So thank you.
Chief Niblock, my question relates to that, just thinking about fire season and how that has changed. I mean, we were in March and we had a grass brush fire. Are you anticipating being able to prioritize not only the medical needs the mayor's talking about, and also looking at how the fires in the canyon, not even anywhere near our service areas, impacted our service load with our agreements and partners? Just kind of trying to understand that. I know Salem Fire has been an excellent partner in California and Washington. How is that happening with your staffing? How is that happening with your prioritization?
So we're evaluating all of those things, and fire season seems to start earlier and earlier every year and go longer. And we've been pretty fortunate here in Salem with the high fuel moistures in recent years, and we haven't seen any really big, we had a 100-acre fire a couple of years ago, and during the eclipse we had a pretty significant fire that ran up next to some houses, and we were able to get that put out. But that's going to continue to be a challenge for us. We are really looking at the age of our fleet and how many times we can drive them all the way to California with mileage. And so that puts miles on those vehicles. And so we're really taking a strong look at how we help our neighbors. We need to help our neighbors because they help us. But that certainly is something we're taking into consideration. Right here locally, we're doing, I actually have a meeting with West Salem Rotary Group later this month to talk about fire-wise safety around your home, how you can make your property less prone to a brush fire affecting your property. There's some smart things you can do that can help prevent a fire. And so we're trying to educate as much as we can the public about these things. Of course, we always encourage people, when it's July, don't go mow the field, spark a rock and start a fire. Do it earlier when the fields are wet.
all those types of things. So we'll continue with our education efforts to try to get people to be smart when the fire season's here, and we'll help our neighbors out when they call for us as best we can.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Member Nordike, followed by Member Anderson.
Thank you. Chief Moore? Welcome back. I have some concerns about the adequacy of your budget. It says here that you've had some noticeable and substantial increases in crime, 21.9% increase over the last 10 years. And we also know that there's a noticeable increase in our population during the same time. This is based on page 105. It sounds to me like your department is doing more with less. Is that fair to say?
I think I've been blessed to have a bunch of great employees, and they do what they can with the resources that they have.
Okay. And it also says here that, quote, sexual assault cases have become increasingly complex and time-consuming due to legislative and public expectation changes. And that concerns me as well. So not only do you have what appears to be a number of sex cases, but you also have sex cases that are becoming a little more difficult. Maybe a little more is not the right word. Can you briefly explain why they're becoming more complex and more time-consuming?
Well, I think maybe more complex because of some of the requirements, photographs and with children and some of those issues. It does say more complex. I will tell you, they're always difficult because many times when we investigate one victim, we find additional victims. One person is responsible for additional crimes that we end up finding out, or we find other people that come forward and say they've been victimized too. And that's one of the reasons they become more time-consuming. And we always have a backlog of cases, and we try and get to them as timely as we can, because these are significant cases for the victims, obviously. So that impacts, I think that's a little bit of why they're more complex, is our ability for the 3 or 4 detectives that work those to try and stay up with the cases.
Thank you. Page 107, it says the number of staff for sex offense investigations is 5.83. Now, I've seen like 0.5 FTEs. I don't know how you get to 0.83. Are you splicing over there?
I could probably answer that, but I'm going to let Kelly. I think it has to do with, we actually have, I think it's 4 investigators that work those cases, and the 1.3 is probably a lieutenant and a sergeant that oversee them.
Do you see that? Well done, well done. Well, I guess, Chief Moore, what I'm trying to say is I'm just concerned that, you know, our city is growing and our police force isn't. No further questions. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.
Member Kaiser, Member Anderson.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a question for Director Wright, Community Development. Curious about, for your permit technicians for building development, building safety, what is your cost recovery? Do we practice cost recovery? And if we do, where are we at in that ratio? How close are we to 100% cost recovery for those types of activities?
Yes, Councilor Kaiser. Thankfully, with building permits or plan reviewers, these are all funded entirely by the Building and Safety Enterprise Fund. And so cost recovery is endemic in that fund. It is an enterprise fund. So all the permit revenue is invested completely into those employees and their costs, as well as the operation itself. So it's 100% full cost recovery.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up from Councilor Hoy, and then back to Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. Director Wright, does that include your long-range planners?
No, it does not. So it is as an enterprise fund, it can only be for those activities, those efforts that are directly related to the issuance of building permits. So that would be everything from building inspections to plan reviews that are the technical, mechanical, or fire safety reviews in some extent. That's not the best example, but the idea here is that it's the administration of the international building code. And so whether it's our regular current planners or long-range planners, they are the implementers of our zoning code, which is separate and is tied to our general fund.
Thank you.
Member Anderson.
Thank you. This is for Fire Chief Nibak. I'm looking at page 100 of the report, which is the FTEs you have, and I pretty much can understand most of them except for one right about in the middle that is 0.84 and is costing us over $200,000, which is exempt justification, compliance, and reporting. Oh, and now here comes somebody who's going to know the answer.
Here we go, yeah.
I'm being told that's a typo.
Okay. What part of that is a typo?
Exempt jurisdiction is what that's supposed to be.
I'm sorry,
exempt jurisdiction.
Well, okay, well, that still doesn't help me. What does that mean? Exempt
Well,
jurisdiction?
that's our through the State Fire Marshal's office, the City of Salem has applied for an exempt jurisdiction, which gives us more flexibility and alternate means and methods for building plan approval for the fire code. So we can work with developers and contractors to help them find a way to yes within the fire code.
It's kind of more of a streamlined thing that is helpful.
Yes.
What I think you're saying, or what I'm inferring from that, is having it here where you're meeting with the developers beforehand is actually, in some sense, saving the city money if you have to do it afterwards?
If you are not an exempt jurisdiction, you rely on the State Fire Marshal's office to deal with all those issues. They're controlling the whole state. So we have a person in the building plans office every day that's doing all the fire code things and working with developers and builders as they come in. If you're bouncing around with the State Fire Marshal's office, they're not, while they cover the whole state, they're not local. And so you have local control over decisions that can make a project pencil out for a developer, and sometimes, quite often, it is a better solution for the fire department for their response.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer.
Can I follow up on that question? So why
Member
isn't?
Tigan.
Thank you. So why isn't that function funded by one of the enterprise funds that we were just heard about?
So the deputy fire marshals that do fire access and water supply for all the building permits that come through, they work with the building folks, but they have their own separate jurisdiction and own separate authority. So the building official is in control of all things in the building, mechanical, those types of things. The fire official is in control of access to the facility and water supply and life safety code. So for our funding, the way that we do it is we get 40% of the fees that you just mentioned. The other 60% go to the building and safety fee, and that goes into the general fund, and our positions are funded out of the general fund.
Member Barker.
Thank you, Chair Cook. I just have a question. There on page 100, there's a fire emergency medical and rescue incident response for Salem Suburban Rural Fire District. What is that?
So we provide through an intergovernmental agreement with Salem Suburban Rural Fire Protection District, which is out in West Salem and in East Salem. An area, they provide about $1 million a year of revenue towards us, and we provide fire service for them, fire and ambulance service. We run about 400 calls, 300 and 400 calls a year out there, so it's a win-win in government. We've been providing this service for quite a period of time. They've been great partners. In fact, during our last bond issue, they also levied a bond measure to the same cents per dollars that we were levying and helped us buy a couple of extra fire trucks. So great partner. They couldn't get the kind of service they're getting from us for the same $1 million in it, and that money comes into the general fund as well. So it's a supplement to the general fund.
Thank you, Chief Kniplock. All right, it looks like we're done with questions for Safe Community. So the final item under special order of business is an opportunity for the committee to continue an earlier discussion or introduce an issue or concern for the committee's consideration. Member Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like a clarification from staff probably for our next meeting, but I would like some more information. This is for Director Wright on the long-range planner, and I know we're proposing to eliminate a position. I would like to understand the impact of that elimination on the Salem process and how it will impact the time frame and our capacity to deliver on that. What I think is probably one of the most important things we've done in a long, long time. So I would like some more information about the implications of that eliminated position.
Thank you, Member Hoy, for that suggestion. And I also, to expand on that with Director Wright, the topics of rental units came up this evening with the TOT funds. And I would like to know, out of the funds that are not being collected, how we expect, with the possible reduction in staffing or movement of staffing, how that would affect the budget based on the Airbnb, VMO rental groups for next week. Member Anderson.
Thank you. A follow-up to both fellow members have said. I'm always curious as to, Director Wright, as to how much of the short-term rentals we're actually collecting and how much we're not collecting. And I'd really be curious about that, because my guess is we're not collecting anywhere near the amount of rentals that are out there. And if you have any numbers on that, that'd be great. And if there's some way some better way to start collecting that money.
Yeah, Councilor Anderson and Councilor Cook, I think what would be best for me is to work with the finance office and get the best numbers that we have available right now for that collection rate. A lot of the collection is handled through finance. Our work in community development is primarily for review as well as potential inspections. So
Sure.
We'll get you a good report that can answer these questions.
Okay. I have a couple other.
Okay.
I'm also curious as to the youth development. That was pretty good testimony, powerful testimony by the people who came. Anecdotal though it was, but it was, that's what we hear from people's testimonies, their own experience. So I'm just kind of curious as to, what does the school district do for youth development? I mean, do they have some program, or why are we the ones who are doing this when we're doing it in the schools? So I'd like some sort of response to that.
Member Anderson, I have a similar question for the chief in regard to the SROs for next week. I know that position has changed in our community from the neighborhood association and responses that officers have given in meetings, just as far as schools and the number of students or schools that SROs are responsible for. If we're able to see, based on the number of, based on the recent bond measure, the number of projected students moving forward, and the number of lack of change of SROs, no expansion in that area, just to be able to understand the gap there, I think would dovetail nicely. Member Barker, followed by Member Hoy.
Thank you, Chair Cook. Regarding the Youth Development Fund, as I read through these various communications from these kids, I saw a real diversity in these people. And I believe it was last year there was some concern about the city council wasn't representative of the diversity of our city. And what we're doing here is we're developing leadership, future leadership for our city. And we see, if you look at the names, you can tell there's a very diverse amount. So we're developing these young people to be the future leaders of our city, to more effectively more effectively represent what our city's population is. And I just think it would be a tragedy if we don't continue to fund this.
Member Hoy, followed
Thank
by
you.
Member Sund.
Thank you. And this is probably a question for the city manager, and this is regarding the tourism promotion area and whether or not, where we're at with that, and maybe if you could come back next time, if you're not prepared tonight, to talk to us about, is that in the works? Where are we at? Do you need anything else from council to get that moving, or just kind of a status on what's entailed with that? Thank you.
Member Sund.
Thank you. Just a brief comment on the youth development program, and I should say, and I'm not sure if it's a conflict of interest or not, but I do serve on the board of Isaac's Room, which is the nonprofit that works with Ike Box and the youth. Also partners with CareCorps during the summer, so been able to be a part of that program. Interestingly enough, since this is the budget committee, we actually did a budgeting class for CareCorps at the hospital, utilizing hospital finance department staff on our own time. On the hospital's time, but not something that the hospital really sponsored, but it was good. It was interesting, and to your point, a very diverse group of kids, great questions, great future potential. It was awesome to hear them. I wish they stuck it out for a couple hours there, but probably thought maybe
boring.
But it's a great program, and I don't see that need being met elsewhere. It'd be interesting to hear with the school district and other things. I just don't see it. The capacity came up, and it comes up if you read through the testimony. Capacity is such a great word, building capacity, and I think that's what this program does. So that's the comment. The question for maybe the city manager or city staff would be, what else is there other than this that could be cut? If anything, we have to have a balanced budget. So if this could be funded, is there an alternative option for the budget committee to consider?
And Member Sund, I thank you for that. It's bringing up how I felt as a neighbor when I would bring these questions forward to council, saying, please don't cut this. And the answer would be, well, where else should we cut? You're absolutely right. We have an obligation, a fiscal responsibility to meet this. But I think it's important as leaders in our community, as part of this budget committee, to also ask the question, especially since this is a general fund issue, where we can make a recommendation to council to pursue revenue and a broad and diverse revenue base. Because taking money out of working capital that's a reoccurring expense to fund these fantastic programs, these necessary programs, as well-intended as they can be, will just put us in the same boat year and year and year. We've got to be able to ask that question. And that's not necessarily for this committee, but that is for these members to be able to take back to your community, to shift that question from, well, where else can you cut, to what can we do, because this is important, to provide stable funding for these programs so that we're not here next year having that same discussion. My 2 cents. Member Leung, followed by Member Anderson.
Thank you. I just had another general comment about the youth development program. So as we all saw, there was quite a bit of youth who came in besides a testimony that was submitted ahead of time wanting to keep the program. One thing that I'm thinking of specifically is, a few years ago, the city of Salem, the city council had passed the child-friendly city initiative, if I remember the exact naming, and it looks like at least this one particular program, this is for our youth. These are for students for our future. And how is Salem demonstrating that it's actually a child-friendly city if they're getting rid of these programs that are for these youth, for their youth and development? I mean, we had two youth in particular who were sharing their stories, how the program has helped them. One of them, I'm not, Mr. Nguyen, he didn't say I don't think he said what year in high school he was in.
Senior.
Was he a senior? Oh, okay. So, I mean, he even said when he shared his story that 4 years ago, he would not have been standing there. He is standing there today. And then we also had the other student who is a college student at Western Oregon. She even admitted too that if she didn't go through the program, she also would not be standing there. So, and I mean, she even said that she was planning on running for future leadership one day. So these programs, especially that program in particular, is cultivating these youth to become the leaders of tomorrow. And how I really feel like we need to find a way to be able to keep this program, but at the same time, I hear that we need to budget, but having a youth program that has been so beneficial to many communities, especially students, would be a disservice to just getting rid of it.
What I'm hearing you say, Councilor Young, is that in balancing that budget, we may be asking the youth to make the payment, and the youth would be making that sacrifice for this program. And I think that's understood. There's many ways that people pay for programmings. My mentors have always said, kids are always learning, it just matters what you're teaching them. In the best of times and worst of times. This budget will always have people that are giving to it, and it just, in this case, the kids would be making that sacrifice. Absolutely. Member Anderson, followed by Member Anderson. Hold on, wait. Look at me, both of you. Member Anderson, followed by Member Anderson. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I have probably one of the best jobs in the world in that I get to be an educator. I'm full-time at a public university, Western Oregon, and I'm part-time at a private university and part-time at a community college. And some of the stories that you guys have heard and read in these letters, I get to hear about 200 of those every term. We do a speech early on in one of my classes where they talk about how they got here and what inspired them. And so often, it's these programs. And so I understand that budgeting is about making priorities, and nobody wants to cut such a great program. But when you think about the future and you think about what is going to return the best investment, there is a reason oftentimes that programs for children and the environment get cut, because we can tell that the roof is going to cave in. And sometimes we forget about the long-term cost of cutting the funding to schools, or not to schools, but to after-school programs and DARE. And so it is my very, I was very encouraged when Mayor Bennett said that, maybe we can look and see if there's a way to save some of these programs. And maybe, as Chair Cook indicated, maybe one option might be looking, and this is, I know, the Revenue Task Force and the members of the City Council, to look at possible revenue enhancement. But I really, really encourage everybody not to cut these programs. 1 year loss of these programs disenfranchises, and maybe those kids don't come back when the program is reinstated a couple years later.
Member Anderson, was that a motion for Budget Committee to make a recommendation to Council at the next meeting to pursue revenue to sustain these programs? Is that what I was hearing, or we just, no, we weren't hearing that? Okay, we'll just false alarm. Member Anderson.
Thank you. My cousin William Anderson touched on all 3 points I want to raise. First one is youth development, and I recently went to the Boys and Girls Club fundraiser banquet where they are doing all sorts of wonderful things. So in addition to what the schools are doing, maybe we could hear a report from what Boys and Girls Club in Salem. They're doing a fantastic job, and they had the same type of people up, with the same sort of stories. So, I don't know if, I'd like to at least know how they're doing and how that dovetails in with the youth development. The second thing he talked about was the roof falling down, and then he also talked about the environmental issues that we don't want to shortchange because just because they're coming into the future, not because they're right here now, the roof will fall down. Last meeting, I discussed the potential of some solar panels on the roof And since that time, I have contacted PGE because they've got a team of people who would be happy to work on that. There are also a number of grants that are available out there, and PGE has contacted facility manager Hanson, and I don't know if the city manager, but I know they've contacted Mina Hanson, and I'd like some sort of report back about is that there's some feasibility there that we could put these on and not really increase the cost much, if any. So I'd like sort of a follow-up to that. And the last thing is, and I think last time we were calling this the bike rack, and I suppose that's nice environmentally. I'm really concerned that, yes, we have done some steps in our environmental action plan, but we haven't really, there's no money in the budget for that. So I would like to see $50,000 in the budget exclusively directed toward implementation of the climate action plan. So that's on my wish list, or however you want to put it. And maybe you can come back and say, we're already doing this, but what I heard last week was, yeah, we have to, we kind of have to wait and wait and wait, and I think there ought to be something we could start to do right now.
Mayor Member Bennett has something to add about the extreme weather preparation strategy, or no? Yes, Mayor Member Bennett has a comment.
No, I wanted to follow up on Councilor Anderson's suggestion of putting a price tag on it. I think, as I mentioned last week, with the Our Salem process underway and a real look at through that particular lens, which is a comprehensive plan that covers 20 years, that meets the has sort of the broad outline of what you'd be doing with a climate action or environmental action plan, whether or not we should kind of have Director Wright maybe take a look at how this could be packaged up, what his additional costs would be, rather than assigning a number. I'm afraid if we assign that number, we might lose part of our money for some other program.
I can agree with that, Mayor, and I guess my response to that would be, and maybe I should have said that, if in fact you don't think that we need to assign the money to it, I would like to see, here's why we don't need to assign money to it, because here's what we are already doing within the budget we're already spending.
And I would like to add possibly, I know the long-term Our Salem planning is important with this, but through the lens that I'm using, I see emergency management and general services like fire impacted in this. So I see it as part of planning in all different fields. Did you have any other comments?
You're requesting that for the May 8th meeting?
I want to make sure, too, that I can fully understand the interest here so that we can get the best report possible. So, Councilor Anderson, Mayor Bennett, if I'm understanding you both correctly, it's certainly there's an interest here to see some increase in resources for climate action. And we delivered a report as a part of this most recent budget package to talk about how some money could be funded in a variety of alternatives. Some of that was quite expensive. Some of that was right at that $50,000 mark. But if I heard you correct, Mayor Bennett, one thing that I caught from the comment was that there's an interest too to see in a new report whether or not we are anticipating any other climate-related actions, either as a part of our Salem or other city operations, just to see what is going to be done in the next year outside of what was in that report?
Well, you could if you want to, but what I really, frankly, if you're going to do a comprehensive plan in the modern day, like beginning last year or beginning 5 years ago, I have to assume part of the lens is climate action or environmental action. And what I would like to understand is how you're using that in your comprehensive plan development. And I'm thinking that if it's defined, it may well fulfill a substantial portion of the need. If it isn't defined, I think we're going to have a lot of questions about what is our Salem all about. If you're talking about growth, and the examples I used was They designated West Salem Hills for housing development 40 years ago, but didn't figure out how to deal with the growth in transportation need. Same thing with South Salem Hills. We've seen this over and over, so I've got to assume you're taking this into account as part of your broader our Salem. And then I'd just like to understand how you're doing it to see how much of this is there.
Yeah.
If it's not there, I think we ought to have a conversation.
100%, Mayor.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, the report that's in your packet can illuminate some of this. There's an attachment to the report that includes the top 20 indicators for our Salem. Now, those indicators are the data measures, one of which is climate related, specifically the greenhouse gas inventory, others of which are contributing factors to that leading indicator, whether it be anything from traffic patterns to other types of, well, it's in the report as far as some of those connections, and I'll take a look at the report and make sure what might still be vague there. But one thing is for sure, there is an entire 1/6, just like with the emblems you see here on the screen here, there's an entire 1/6 of the indicators that are fully committed to the natural environment, and several of those indicators have direct cross-correlation to other indicators along those 6 same themes that we use here for our strategic planning for our budget. So this is inextricably connected, without a doubt, and more importantly, all the data that we are establishing for our Salem plan today with Phase 1 will be the critical core components for the community to consider any future growth scenarios and moving forward with Phase 2, which is visioning. And again, climate will be at least 1/6, if not perhaps even a greater share of the concern that the community will act upon when they make decisions for a future vision.
And part of it is calling that out. I
Yes.
think really there has to be, you have to call that out in the current level of discussion going on around us. We need to be able to communicate clearly what's going on relative to climate action in the Our Salem project without we don't want to disrupt the budget. We want to make sure it's organic in this process. So I think you're on the right track. I just think I think you've got what you need. I think you just have to pull it together a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Member Anderson.
Thank you. You know, I guess there's 2 things I'm interested in. One is I want to see some indication that we are taking action as opposed to studying. And the flip side of that coin is, if in fact we are not taking action because we do not have funding, I would like to know that too. And I scanned but did not peruse your report, and it seemed to me that some of these were, this is 2 years out, this is 3 years out, but some of them, and maybe the lesser expensive ones, are ones that we could start to do right now. So that's what I'd be interested in.
Very good.
Member Barker.
Thank you, Chair Cook. I just had a question. With all the new construction that's coming our way everywhere you look, when will we start realizing tax revenue on that?
Okay, so Member Barker wants to know if growth pays for itself. Do we have staff that, no, with all the new construction coming in, when we intend to see revenue?
Well, as David Lacey is coming up to give a perhaps more Salem-specific answer, I will share your question is one that's being asked by all Oregon cities, all Oregon taxing jurisdictions. It's a priority of the League of Cities to, depending upon your perspective, reform or fix the property tax system in Oregon so cities can receive revenues as population increases, as development occurs, to fund the services that certainly you heard this evening, fund services that are tied to that population and development growth. I think David can speak to that more specifically for Salem.
Sure, David Lacey from Finance. So it is included in our budget and our forecast. We do look at the growth activity that's happening. There are some lag times between when a building's actually constructed and when it actually hits the tax roll, and then there are differences sometimes depending on if a new construction's in an urban renewal area or not. But we do factor in an amount each year, so looking for a forecast for 1920. we are expecting about $132.5 million in new assessed value coming on the roll, which would generate about $730,000 in property tax revenue.
All right, any other additional concerns regarding agenda items or issues that weren't brought up? All right.
If I may,
Yes,
Chairperson,
please.
Certainly, if you don't have any this evening, if you think of any as you're reflecting on tonight's discussion, please send those to Kelly, because you are scheduled on the 8th to hear the good governance result area, then to start deliberating. So if you do have any questions, any outstanding issues, please get those to Kelly so we can be prepared to the extent that we can for the 8th. You do have a backup meeting, I believe, scheduled for the 15th, being held in reserve, but you are scheduled to deliberate on the 8th, a week from tonight.
Member Shrox?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, since we will be deliberating soon, my question involves the youth development programs, and I keep going back to the city manager's budget message when he talked about the proposed cuts that the Salem Kaiser School District decided those programs were discretionary to the mission of the school district, which I find very disappointing. They're great programs. I think they belong in the schools. So my main question is there any room for additional conversations, negotiations between City of Salem staff and school district staff to see if they will not step up and partner funding? I think they should fund all of it, of course, but 75% of it, and Salem could maybe partner with another 25%, or are we completely at the end of the road as far as the school district's willingness to support those programs?
That's an excellent question with the report, and that also kind of tag teams off of what Member Anderson was talking about with Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, other nonprofits in the area also working on this work to support. It would be interesting to see if there was some other forms of sustainability with that program.
Yeah, and I don't know if we can have an answer by next week, but it's, you know, it does affect a vote, our vote. Thanks.
All right. Is there anyone present who would like to provide testimony regarding items not on this agenda? All right. Seeing that there's none, is there any other business for the Budget Committee this evening? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned.
Yes.